We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
Hey, as a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. We're reviewing all of the Week 17 NFL action. Another great week, Sam. How you doing?
Week 17, not the final week, though. Week 18 upcoming.
No. I screwed it up on the entire preview podcast. I kept calling it Week 16 because it was the second to last week, and it was messing with my head, but they're making us work the extra week this year. So next week is, I love this one, Scenario Week. I know you love it, too. It's not just me reading tiebreakers. It's reading scenarios. A lot of if-then statements. If this team wins and that team loses, figuring out seeding. But we got to save that for the preview show. Right now, it's reviewing yesterday's action, full slate on Sunday. There was no Saturday games. Mm-hmm. So you ready to go?
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Let's roll.
All right, well, do we start with the biggest game?
Yes.
In the 1 o'clock slate? All right, let's go Bengals 34, Chiefs 31. We already did, the audio version of the PFF NFL Daily is already out there. Then we're going to go live right after this, breaking down a little bit more Bengals Chiefs. But man, Bengals 34, Chiefs 31, a massive win for the Bengals. They're calling it the biggest win in Paul Brown Stadium history in our hometown of Cincinnati. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, take it to the going into the week, the number one seed in the AFC, overcome a 2-touchdown deficit and the whole deal. Your initial reactions to the Bengals win over the Chiefs?
Yeah, really impressive. I thought the narrative was getting a little bit out of control before the game about the Bengals. Unstoppable offense, and they have the better quarterback, and you'd take Burrow over Mahomes for the next 5 years and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, settle down a little bit. Like, the offense was stopped a couple of weeks ago against Denver. It's clearly not unstoppable. It obviously didn't get stopped yesterday, but that doesn't mean it's unstoppable. And as much as Joe Burrow is playing fantastically right now, PFF's number one graded quarterback going into the game, I would imagine he'd be the number one quarterback after all the grades are reviewed and locked. We've still seen this from Mahomes for a lot longer. So I think tap the brakes just a little bit. But this was a real statement win from Cincinnati. When they got 2 touchdowns down against the Chiefs, at home, you were like, that's probably not going that well. They struggled a little bit early in the game. The weakness that they have in terms of a banged-up offensive line heading in there, you were sort of thinking, well, that's probably the end of that. Nice showing, but, game over. And then they didn't. They kept pegging it back and really dragging themselves back into it and ultimately snatched the game at the death. I thought it was really impressive by them.
Really impressive by the Bengals. I think, agreed. Jamar Chase finishes with 11 catches for 266 yards, 3 touchdowns. As I do mention on the daily, he did it in different ways. He was winning down the field. There's a 3rd and 27, essentially a back shoulder conversion where Jamar Chase is left one-on-one. I mean, it was to the point where we used to say this about Tyreek Hill, right? When he's left one-on-one, you throw it up to him. It was a little different, right? You just throwing a bomb to Tyreek, but this was, hey, let's let Jamar Chase make a play. But also T. Higgins allowed to go up and make plays. There were a couple questionable penalties in there on Kansas City.
Yes.
Some ticky-tack, pass interference penalties. The one other thing I want to highlight, though, I think the Chiefs' offense overall was pretty good. They stalled in the second half. There are a few plays they'll want back, and a lot of them are Tyreek Hill. There's a play before the half where Mahomes throws the ball 62 yards from the line of scrimmage, kind of throws it up and away from coverage. Classic Mahomes throw. Tyreek does a good job getting in position to catch it and then drops it. Would have set up a late score. There were just a few plays I think the Kansas City offense would want back. It's weird. The Kansas City offense did not seal the deal when they were up. And again, that is one of those things from a Chiefs perspective we hadn't seen for years during their run.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to take anything away from Cincinnati because I think this is just the nature of football. But there were a few plays in this game where they absolutely rode their luck for a while. As you said, there were a couple of pretty hideous officiating calls late in the game where Cincinnati's drive was in trouble and the officials bailed them out twice on that drive, kept it going, and that was the drive. That was the difference in the game. But when they were in trouble, they had this terrible kickoff before the half, short and didn't have a ton of hang time. Return man, I think, fielded it about the 10-yard line, set off, broke it, went the whole distance, called back because of holding, saved a touchdown. Then that was, I think, the next play or a couple plays later was that bomb to Tyreek Hill, which again Tyreek Hill had in his hands, and then I think Von Bell ends up being able to break it up. So you are just able to escape another big score at a time where you were pretty much reeling, and then obviously the kind of craziness late in the game. Now, to be fair, they also had the flip side of luck, right? They had the ball in the hands of defensive backs, Bengals defensive backs twice. Mahomes threw 2 would-be interceptions, neither of which they came up with. So you can kind of look at the flip side and say, well, if they just caught either one of those, it would have been a different game as well. But, yeah, I think the Chiefs had the opportunities to put this game away and didn't get it done. The 3rd and 27 call as well. I know your buddy, Spags, is an aggressive defensive play caller. On the other hand, it's really not difficult to not give up 3rd and 27, right? Just don't blitz and leave their number one receiver on a freaking island. How hard is that?
Yeah, that was ugly. The Chiefs did their usual, getting some unblocked rushers because of Spags and all that stuff, but certainly wasn't enough. They did not cover well on the back end, and when you leave guys out on an island against Jamar Chase, bad stuff can happen. The Mahomes plays, not to completely feed the too high narrative, but it was interesting watching the tape, as they say, Sam, early in the game. Every time the Bengals seemed to roll to cover one early on, the Chiefs hit some big plays, long touchdown to Demarcus Robinson, corner route to Byron Pringle. And Mahomes threw the ball pretty well, but when they played those too high coverages, Mahomes just straight up misread cover 2 one time, got away with it. Like you mentioned, 2 dropped interceptions. So, yeah, there was just a lot. There was a lot to unpack in this game. Joe Burrow plays great again. And then we get to the end of the game, and it's 31-31, and the Bengals are they're 1 yard away from taking the lead. And it feels like this is another thing the Chiefs have run into, right? Teams are saying, we're playing Patrick Mahomes. I still think it's Mahomes and the Chiefs that are dictating some of these decisions for their opponents, where teams are so afraid to put the ball back in his hands. And essentially the late game decision making, 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, Bengals get stuffed. They're trying to score a touchdown. They have a 4th and 1, under 30 seconds left in the game, I believe it was, and they're going for it. So it's 31-31. Their options are kick a field goal to go up 3 with seconds left for the Chiefs to, maybe run a couple plays to get into field goal range, or go for the touchdown. And the Bengals kind of get away with it, right? It's 4th and 1. They throw an incomplete. There's a penalty. They get another chance. And Joe Burrow tries it again. Joe Burrow tries it again. There's a penalty. He twists his knee. And I'm thinking, okay, now this isn't worth it, right? The 4th and 1 decision because you hurt Joe Burrow. He was fine after the fact. But it essentially gave the Bengals a 1st and goal. They take a knee, kick the field goal with no time left. They don't give the Chiefs any opportunity. Any thoughts on that final decision there to go for it rather than kick the field goal.
Well, so firstly, going back to the too high thing, this was the first team since Kansas City's offense has gotten right that actually played Kansas City showing a bunch of too high looks, right? The Raiders fixed the Chiefs' offense by simply not playing to the game plan that was working against them. The Chargers did a similar thing. They just didn't play too high. Like, this was the first team that actually showed up and said, okay, we're going to run the game plan that caused Kansas City problems earlier in the season. Let's see what happens. And I think what we've come to the conclusion is, yeah, it's still the best way to cause them problems, but it's not causing them the kind of problems that it did earlier in the season because they're not in this pit of confidence, of lack of confidence the way they were earlier in the year. They're not worried that we're going to turn the ball over in the next 3 plays, so we better do something special. Like, the Raiders genuinely fixed the Chiefs simply by giving them 2 games on easy mode in the midst of their crisis. So that, I think, was an interesting data point from this game, that you should probably still run that too high type of game plan against Kansas City, but don't expect it to have the success that it had earlier in the year where it completely shut down that offense and caused them like all kinds of mistakes.
Really quick, I'll let you get to the 4th down decision. But if the Bengals hold on to those interceptions, I believe both were against too high looks. Maybe the narrative is probably the same, isn't it? There were definitely a lot of plays where the Bengals are playing soft and the Chiefs just took the underneath stuff, which was great. They need to keep doing that. But again, Mahomes completely misreading cover 2. It's still probably the strategy you want to lean on going forward against this Chiefs offense.
I mean, certainly the first one, I think they scored a touchdown on that drive. Like, if you swap out that touchdown for a turnover and, the Bengals score, yeah, it certainly had the potential to shift the outcome and the narrative based off that look. So again, like, I don't think that the Chiefs offense is great against those looks. I think it's still the best way of playing them, but they have the Raiders, like the confidence boost they got from those games against the Raiders and the Chargers, I think has shifted how this offense is going to behave going forward. My first reaction to so the Bengals were in a really tricky spot, like situationally late in that game. They get a big play, they get down to the shadow of the goal line, they pick up a first down, and then the 2-minute warning hits. So now you've got exactly 2 minutes and 1st and goal from the 1. So you're in this spot where, well, that's all the time for Mahomes. Like, if we score, we punch it in, the next play, Mahomes has almost a full 2 minutes to work with. Like, that's you're essentially assuming he's going to score at that point because it's Mahomes and the Chiefs. Did it feel to you that they were even trying to score on those QB sneaks?
No, I think they were really thinking about running the clock. By the way, they got the ball back with about 6 minutes left, or under 6 minutes left. So the Bengals took off the rest of the clock. So to your point, they had the 2 minutes, and yeah, I think there probably was this element. Again, I don't think teams do this unless they have an elite quarterback on the other side. And maybe there's just different. The clock management around the league is getting smarter. And maybe they were saying, no matter who we're playing, we're not going to leave time left for the other team. But yeah, I think there's this element of, with 1 yard to go, we're just trying to run the clock, make Kansas City use their last timeouts. They use their last timeout with 1:46 left. And then let's just make sure that the opposing offense doesn't get the ball. And then the Bengals also kind of get away with 2 4th and 1s where there was offsetting penalties to give them another 4th and 1. Then there was the illegal hands to the face by L'Jarius Sneed. And that one gave the Bengals the automatic first down where they could just take a knee and then spike it. I was getting nervous for Brandon Allen that he might press the wrong Madden button because he had to take a knee. The Bengals had no timeouts left. He had to take a knee with 46 seconds left and then go back out there because Burrow hurt himself. Allen had to go back out there and then spike it with 3 seconds left. And we've seen Kirk Cousins, he pressed the wrong button that one time. He took a knee when he was supposed to spike. If Allen did that would have been disastrous. I think Romo was saying the same thing. But I think there's an element of like, hey, let's run the clock and make sure that Mahomes never gets a chance.
Yeah, so when they started that sequence with 2 minutes to go, I don't think they were trying to score at all. I think they were trying to chew up those plays, chew up the clock, but then you put yourself in this position where, okay, now it's 4th and 1 from the 1, and you need it now. And that's not the easiest thing in the world to just switch on. So they run that play. The play's kind of busted. Like the Chiefs play it really well. They cause Burrow all kinds of problems. He's running for his life, flicks the ball to Mixon, who all of a sudden has a lot of work to do, gets past Sorensen, extends. I'm pretty sure broke the plane of the goal line, would have been a touchdown, but you have the offsetting penalties. And now you're back to the same, like, okay, do-over, right? Let's go it again. And now you have that decision again. So they've chewed up a lot of clock, but there's still like 50 seconds left on the clock. And if you just go and say, all right, let's kick the field goal, now you're saying it's Mahomes with 50 seconds to move, not even the length of the field now, like a shorter amount of time. So I think if you're of the opinion that you don't want to give Mahomes the ball with 2 minutes to go the length of the field to score a touchdown, you probably have to stay consistent and say you also don't want to give him the ball with 50 seconds to go, only needing a field goal. Commit to it at all. Commit to it completely or not at all. They commit to it completely, like end up getting bailed out by the penalty, and then they can just chew up the rest of the time and kick and walk off, and everybody's happy. So it was definitely a weird sequence, but I think they were in this really difficult spot, and I don't hate the driving force of we can't give Mahomes the ball back. I don't think that's the wrong way of looking at it.
Right. And then we always look at the flip side too. So if the Bengals had been stopped on 4th and 1, you're giving the Chiefs the ball with little time left, right? About 50 seconds to go 99 yards. Not 99 yards. You got to go about 60 yards, right? To get into field goal range, 65 yards to get into field goal range with no timeouts. The difference between getting, the Chiefs getting the ball at the 1 versus the 25 is astronomical, right? And then you always have the chance of, maybe getting a safety, holding call in the end zone, the way Mahomes scrambles and all that stuff. So you got to look at the other side of it too. If things fail, it's not the worst thing in the world. But the fallout from this game is massive, Sam. The Bengals are now in play for the number 1 seed. But again, as we mentioned on today's PFF NFL Daily, it's the Titans who are in control of the number 1 seed right now if they could beat the Houston Texans next week. So a huge win for the Bengals. Again, the biggest, they clinched the AFC North, by the way, the AFC North, which we could not figure out for the majority of the season. Bengals moved to 10-6 to win the AFC North. So they'll at least host a playoff game at worst. Whereas the Chiefs, they could still be the number 1 seed, but they need help now. And it looks like the Chiefs are the likely odds are the Chiefs are going to be playing during the wild card round.
By the way, the other sort of point of this, when you hear people railing against analytics decisions and go for it on 4th down or 2 points or whatever, and one of the things they always say is, well, there's all these, it's in-game elements, like how is your offense playing, all these things. The Bengals offense was cooking, right? Like if you're debating whatever the sort of baseline analytic number is, go for it, don't go for it. If you're factoring in the extra things, right? How's our offense playing right now? Like the Bengals offense was absolutely singing. It was singing even more on 3rd downs, like the gotta have it situations in that game. If the number was saying go for it, the number specific to this game would have been screaming it even louder. So again, like the data would say that's the right call by Cincinnati. Trust your offense more than your defense in this situation, given the time on the clock and given the opposing quarterback. And, ultimately it paid off for them.
All right, we'll get into the rest of the 1 o'clock games. But first, do you want a chance to win the ultimate game day feast? Whether it's football success or financial savvy, winning starts with asking us questions. Would you like to know what it's like behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know on your financial future? Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help you put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast. Celebrate football's favorite Sunday. We'll cover your catering up to $2,500, coordinate your order from a restaurant near you, and have it delivered on February 13th, 2022. Don't forget to check out Chris on the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, it's westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western Southern, you can rest assured on game day. All right, other big games in the 1 o'clock hour. I guess we could talk Titans right now.
By the way,
in the AFC.
One last point on that game. we've spent the last week or so generally as a company, as individuals, as a collective, shitting on Trevon Diggs, who has a ton of interceptions, but has also given up more yardage and big plays than any cornerback in the NFL. This game kind of showed that there's still a ton of value in simply being able to catch the damn ball when it's thrown in your general vicinity, right? The interception that Eli Apple dropped in particular, like Eli Apple is of the stone-handed ilk of cornerbacks, right? That dude cannot catch to save his life, never has been able to. Dating back to college, you can put the ball in his coverage, generally speaking, without the fear that it's ever going to get picked off, right? You just don't have to worry about it. And Mahomes fires him the ball. Apple makes a good read and a good break on it, just can't catch it. And you're like, if that's Trevon Diggs, that is picked off. And that drive was the difference. Like that was, they scored a touchdown on that drive. If it's Diggs versus Apple, the exact same play is a completely different end result, and one that is massively more beneficial to the defense. So, yeah, look, there's a balance to all this stuff, right? And the whole point we're making is that, yes, for all the great plays Trevon Diggs has made, there's a ton of negative that people are not paying attention to. But that play kind of highlighted that there is still a ton of value in corners that are simply going to catch the opportunities that they are given, which is, it feels like a low bar, right? When the ball's thrown at you, catch it. Right, it's a fairly simple thing to be able to do, but it's worth making the point that it isn't the gimme that it is for a wide receiver whose job it is to catch the ball. Like, there's still a fairly large percentage of passes thrown at cornerbacks that simply are not caught when they should be, and those can be critical plays.
Yeah, look, I like to think we spent the week just kind of explaining Trevon Diggs' grade, man. I mean, My mentions are still blowing up because apparently that went viral. I just kind of said he went over 1,000 yards allowed this season, Trevon Diggs. We could talk more about that with the Cowboys game. And nobody's diminishing the value of interceptions, particularly Diggs having 11, which, yeah, we haven't seen that, in 40 years or whatever it is in our lifetime, Sam, because we're under 40. But there's more to football than 11 out of 1,000 plays, right? There's other football, and we're grading all of them. And we're probably giving proper credit. We're giving a lot of credit for those great interceptions, and a lot of other interceptions are luck, and they don't deserve as much credit. But you're right. There's value in turning the ball over, and this isn't a new PFF discussion for us, Sam. We've had this exact same discussion on Marcus Peters. Mm-hmm. We've had this exact same discussion on Xavier Howard. It's not. The discussion's not what would you rather have. It's when we are evaluating players on a snap-by-snap basis, we're putting a grade on how well they've played. If you asked Cowboys fans or Cowboys coaches, would you take Trevon Diggs' season? That's a different question than how well is he playing snap for snap. If you knew he was going to have 11 interceptions, there's a great argument that says, give me the 1,000 yards allowed, because they're not really all on him. We kind of assign it, but it's not like all his to blame. But give me the 11 interceptions. Yeah, there is a great argument to be had there, and maybe we can have that debate, later in the week or during the Cowboys breakdown. I wanted to get to the Titans. They win 34-3 over the Miami Dolphins. I think there's a lot at play in this game. I mean, the Titans defense locks down this Miami offense, but at the same time, we're gonna the Tua narrative just gets it's rough right now, right? He had Miami rolling back to back, really difficult weeks for Tua, but the Titans, this could have been a difficult game for them, and they cruise, man. They cruise and put themselves in position to just have to beat the Houston Texans, those feisty Texans next week. But the number one seed is Tennessee's to lose at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it showed that Miami's run, like how important strength of opposition is. Miami's run of 7 straight wins and putting themselves, they were in the playoffs, I think, heading into this week, right? Like they actually, when you looked at it statistically, they had a lower percentage chance of making the playoffs than some of the teams behind them, but they entered this round of games in one of those spots. But when you looked at the run of people, they had one legitimate win, essentially, in that entire time, the Baltimore game, who, remember, that game was a Thursday night game, and Baltimore was coming off a Sunday game where they played like a full quarter of overtime, so they were wrecked, and Lamar, like there was a plan to beat Lamar, right? That zero blitz game, the six rushers to keep him penned in the pocket and, okay, find a pass, and he couldn't. There wasn't the same game plan to beat Tennessee. So you didn't have the advantage of a team that was knackered playing you. You didn't have the advantage of a quarterback that had like an obvious blueprint to cause him problems. And you had to face like a real team for the first time in God knows how many weeks. And it didn't go well. Like when you don't have Ian Book to deal with as the opposition, suddenly life gets an awful lot harder in the NFL. And that's exactly what we saw from Miami. Like this is not a terrible team, but they had been riding a win streak that was built off the back of awful opposition. And when they faced good opposition, all their flaws got magnified, and you sort of saw and got highlighted just how many problems Miami has.
Yeah, and I think Tua is going to be the first part of the discussion. I mentioned he's back-to-back games where he wasn't great. I know they won against the Saints, but he didn't play his best football in that game. And in this particular one, 3 turnover-worthy plays. Once again, not offsetting them with special throws, really, but the turnover-worthy plays were just ugly, man. You got the Tua owns RPOs. Well, the ball just straight slipped out of his hand, drops it backwards, throws one up to a safety just before the half that gets dropped. Trick play where Tua's just taking too long in the pocket and fumbles once again. So you just when Miami needs to throw the ball down the field, which they did a little bit more in this game, you can almost see you're big on sliders, right? Well, here's the Tua slider. As his average depth of target goes up, his PFF grade goes down. That has been the general trend for Tua this year, throughout his career, but this year in particular, in his 2-year career. And again, my concern coming into the game, he's got 4 really good games this year. They are literally against 4 of the worst 6 or 7 defenses in the NFL. And that matters a little bit, right? That matters who you're playing against. So the discussions are going to be continuing as far as the Dolphins, what they're going to do at the quarterback position, and then continue to give credit to the Tennessee Titans. They had no Julio Jones, A.J. Brown. Like they did this with Ryan Tannehill throwing for 120 yards, and it's Deontay Foreman running for $132. I mean, they just continue to keep the ground game going to kind of keep their identity, even without Derrick Henry, for a lot of these games. And Titans move to 11-5 here.
Tua's third turnover-worthy play is, I think, a really important one for him because when we go back to that slider discussion that I had with Trevor, we sort of settle on this idea with Tua that the arm strength slider is below where you want it to be. It's low. The accuracy slider is pretty high. The question is, where is he on the third one? Where is he on the decision-making and the reads and the anticipation stuff? And that third one was that, trick play, the kind of reverse, toss it to Tua in the backfield. Now you get to take a shot with the thing that trickery opened up. So there's like 2 guys out in pass patterns. The Titans didn't buy on all the window dressing crap that you were running, so both those guys are covered. So now what do? Now you're Tua, you're bouncing around in this makeshift pocket, and the play hasn't worked. Like it's done. So you're now faced with this decision of having to calculate quickly on the fly. All right, what do I do with this now? Whatever we were planning is not on. I need to either find something quickly or get rid of the ball and live to fight another day. And he did neither. Like he didn't try and make something happen from the busted play. And he didn't sort of have an alternative. He just kind of dithered around and got sacked. Forced fumble. Like that's a play you can't have. If you're going to be Tua and you're going to be this guy without the special arm and, who's not making a ton of monster plays, that's a play you can't screw up. Like your job, if you're going to be of this game managing spectrum of quarterback, is to manage the game. And that's not managing the game. Like that's finding a problem on a play that didn't necessarily have one. If that was, pick an elite quarterback and that exact same scenario, that guy is going to read it quickly, understand that it's covered, and just junk it. Get rid of the play, find a dude to throw the ball at his feet, just eat it and move on. Tua didn't do that. He didn't even try and make something special out of it. He just caused a fumble where none needed to exist.
By the way, Tua's actual interception came while they were it was 27-3. Game was pretty much over in the fourth quarter, and it was an unlucky one. It was these other three plays, though, that didn't necessarily even have they had a big impact on the game, but they're the concerning plays. That's what made Tua a difficult evaluation, Sam, and why I brought up that Jimmy Garoppolo comp. Because if you watch like 35, 40 dropbacks of Tua, you get a lot of quick decision-making, gets the ball out on time. We've talked all year how he's protected a really bad offensive line because of that quick release. But just like a Jimmy G, there's 2 or 3 plays per game where you're just scratching your head like, why did he do that? Right? What is this decision making? Tua had that in college to a point. You see less of it in college because the competition's not as steep, but you're starting to see it right now where most of the game can be pretty good and efficient, but there's 2 or 3 head scratchers. But unlike some of the more volatile quarterbacks, there's not 2 or 3 special throws to kind of offset that. You're not picking up 40-yard gains because the quarterback threw a dime, to flip the field like a Justin Herbert or someone else with a better arm. So, again, the Dolphins discussion is going to be a fascinating one this offseason. I believe they're officially eliminated from playoff contention here in the AFC. And now the Titans, ball is in their court, man, to get the number 1 seed. It is another year of crazy AFC. The Titans would be like the number 5 seed or 4 seed or whatever in the NFC with 11 wins, but it is number 1 if they could go 12-5 next week against the Houston Texans with Ryan Tannehill at the helm. And everybody loves to talk Coach of the Year. Matt LaFleur probably up there, but man, I think I might throw my vote to Mike Vrabel. They've used 88 players now. Is the total. It's an NFL record, and they just keep churning over in Tennessee. And this is the same year that they've beaten the Chiefs and the Bills and all the other top teams other than the Patriots here in the AFC.
Yeah, they've got some really statement wins. I don't know how many of them are necessarily incredibly impressive, but they've won so many of those games where they needed to have it, or it would have been entirely excusable for them to not get it done. But they keep repeatedly showing up and knocking over teams like San Francisco, like Miami, when they needed to. It's more that their losses are weird. Like, their wins are actually incredibly impressive. If you just look at the teams they've beaten and the run that they've done it on, you're like, okay, that's really legit. But then you're like, but then what the hell happened against the Jets? And how on earth did you lose to Houston the first time? Why did you implode in the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh and throw that one away? Like, it's this sort of incredibly impressive season that is punctuated by a random turd every now and again.
Well said, as always. You have a great way with words.
Thanks.
The Dolphins are 8-8. They're eliminated. Let's go to the Rams-Ravens game because the Ravens fall to 8-8, but they're still technically around. The Rams win 20-19. Another great fourth quarter comeback by Matthew Stafford. Did overcome some early decision-making issues. I think the Ravens have been, man, they've been making QBs look good for the most part over these last few weeks. They've been getting torched in the secondary. Stafford had a couple turnover-worthy plays early, couple interceptions, fumble, but Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, and OBJ all making some big plays down the stretch. Rams win, move to 20-19. They move to 12-4, and with the Cowboys loss, the Rams now have the open door for the number 2 seed in the NFC. And it's a huge win for the Rams, who at one point it looked more like are they losing it? Is it all falling apart? And maybe it really was just a little midseason slump because they bounced back and they're looking pretty good right now.
This could not be more Detroit Matthew Stafford, this game. Like, this game was full Detroit Matthew Stafford. Like, if you were of the opinion that everything that happened in Detroit was somebody else's fault, Matthew Stafford is this incredibly talented quarterback. The talent is undeniable. We've seen it. Look at these throws. The reason that all these mistakes happened was somebody else's fault. It was, one of the greatest receivers of all time in Megatron, or it was the play caller, or it was the offensive line that was always pretty good. It was not Matthew Stafford's fault. This was a Detroit game. It's like, yeah, Stafford, great fourth quarter comeback, fantastic plays late in the clutch, but it was the perfect encapsulation of the firefighter getting credit for putting out the fire he started. Matthew Stafford now leads the NFL in pick sixes. This is his 4th pick six on the season. Stafford,
not all his fault.
No.
Not all of them. This one was absolutely his fault.
Yes.
Not all of them have been.
But, like, this was the classic example of this was a team you should have annihilated. Like, look back a week ago what Cincinnati just did to the Baltimore Ravens. This is a team with no secondary who didn't have their starting quarterback. And, you know, you've been rolling. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't have hung 30 on the Ravens, been miles out of sight, and just blitzed them. And you didn't because, in part, Stafford goes out there and just pitches the ball for points for the Ravens, like immediately. So Stafford has 3 turnover-worthy plays, and then he has to put out the fire that he started in the first place. Now, he achieved that, but is that better than simply not setting fire to the house in the first place? No, it isn't. Like, the better person here is the person that doesn't take a blowtorch to the drapes and then have to go find water. Like, this is Matthew Stafford, a guy who makes a ton of catastrophic errors and then tries to offset them with all the big plays that he's capable of making. Like, he is the antithesis of what we were talking about with Tua, where he doesn't make enough special plays. Stafford makes a ton of them, but the question is, does he make enough to offset the ball that you pitched to the Ravens defender who took it in for 6, or the triple coverage that you heaved it into because you didn't want to take the open dude for the first down, like running across underneath? Like, Stafford does see things differently to other quarterbacks, and sometimes that creates something special that other guys simply are not capable of seeing or hitting. But there's a reason that quarterbacks see things generally the same way, because usually that's where the open guy is, and Stafford doesn't. Stafford doesn't see things the same way, and when it goes badly, it goes spectacularly badly. And that is the difference between Matthew Stafford and elite quarterbacks. That's why he's never had a PFF grade that puts him in that, 90 world of guys that are fantastic or elite. Like, Joe Burrow is in year 2 working behind a crappy offensive line, and Burrow is playing at a level that Stafford has never gleaned, never touched in his decade-long career.
I just want you to keep going. You're on a roll this morning, man.
No, I'm out now. I'm done.
You get a good pot of coffee this morning?
I did get the venti this morning. Like, I learned the lesson for the first time in like a month.
Yeah, you're not getting those grandes, right? That's good. Late season, you got to pivot to the venti because I can feel it. I can feel your energy from my parents' basement here. I think, again, well summed up. Just to put perspective, it was a really bad misread pick 6 by Matthew Stafford that we mentioned. Also took points on the board with a fumble in the third quarter in field goal range for the Rams that they lost, right? Just poor ball security in the pocket. All that said, we see Cooper Kupp continuing to make plays. OBJ with, again, touchdown, really nice, footwork and just making a few plays and, starting to only 39 yards on 5 catches, but you're starting to see OBJ become a part of this offense a little bit more. And then the Rams just got to Tyler Huntley. They sacked him 5 times on just 37, 5 times. He had 32 attempts. So, a lot of negative plays there. Ravens offense struggling when Mark Andrews isn't catching the ball, and he continues to just make a ton of big plays. Ravens just could not do much offensively, right? They scored 19 total points, 7 of which came off that pick 6. So the Ravens are still alive, though. They're 8-8. They're still alive, whereas the Rams going up against their arch nemesis, the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan next week with a little bit on the line. You've got the division title, but it's the number 2 seed on the line for the Rams. And, the Rams have won, I don't want to say despite Matthew Stafford, because he did lead the comeback here. And it wasn't a totally disastrous game. I thought, against the Vikings, they won despite Matthew Stafford. But we're starting to see the Rams win games without their quarterback playing great. That was what the difference was in the middle of the season, right? Stafford would play horrible and they didn't have a chance. They're starting to win games a little bit without the quarterback. And, as much as we talk QBs and you want to be good at that position, maybe that bodes well for the Rams that they can win differently, right? Have their defense step up and or just have their receivers take over, right? Receivers can create plays even when the quarterback isn't playing his best game. They create after the catch, whatever it might be.
Maybe, but I think this game would be a warning. This was a game you should have won pretty handily. Baltimore didn't have their quarterback. Their defense has been decimated. This is not a formidable championship caliber, high-end playoff team. It potentially should be, if they hadn't been ravaged by injuries and they had Lamar Jackson playing well. But it isn't right now. That's why they've been overhauled in the division. That's why they're getting dumped out. That's not the standard anymore. And you eked out this win. You snuck by. That probably doesn't happen against the teams that you're going to need to beat if you're going to get to the Super Bowl that you're so desperate to appear in, right? That's all the moves you've made. I'm not using that all-in term because I don't think that's what they've done, but that's the term that people are using, right? They're all in for the Super Bowl this year, which means you're going to need to figure out a way of getting past Green Bay. This doesn't work against Green Bay. If Stafford goes out and has a game like this, Eric jokes, Eric on the PFF forecast or the live show, Stafford is not a win in Lambeau kind of guy. You're going to need to be a win in Lambeau kind of guy if you want to make this Super Bowl, and you can't go out there and pitch 3 balls to the defense in Lambeau. That's not going to cut it. The pick six was obviously egregious. The decision he made on 3rd and 10 was arguably worse. There was a wide the hell open guy underneath that would have picked up the first down, and instead Stafford heaves it into triple coverage on a throw that was never open. He was playing for OBJ, I think it was, to essentially run between and past 2 deep safeties. That's a throw that is just not...
in the corner.
He was splitting the 2 safeties on a seam. That simply is not an available pass. At no point would you look at that. They pull out the Microsoft Surfaces and they're running through the stills. There's no frame that you can freeze it on where you can say, oh, I see what you were doing there. Yeah, that makes sense. It was never an option, and he took it anyway. And it would have been bad even if there hadn't been a wide open guy underneath that would have picked up the first down anyway. That's a horrendous decision. Now, okay, look, we've said Stafford makes a lot of big plays as well to offset some of those terrible decisions. And in this game, he had a couple of big-time throws. He did execute the comeback. He put out the fire that he started. But you don't have that kind of margin for error against the best teams in the NFL. This is a team that has to be judged by the standards they've set themselves, which is Super Bowl or bust. And Stafford was a guy that you brought in at great cost to take you to a different level. And he doesn't do that if he's playing the way he is playing right now.
Speaking of taking you to a different level, cheers to 2022 and resolutions you can actually keep. How about upgrading your grooming routine for the new year, Sam? Our sponsors at Manscaped are here to make the ball drop into 2022 the cleanest ever. Ball drop, cleanest ever.
I get it. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Set your first New Year's resolution with good intentions and join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code PFF for 20% off plus free shipping. It's new year, new me. With the global leaders in male grooming, this year, take your grooming to the next level with their Performance Package 4.0 and brand new Ultra Premium Body Wash. Inside the Performance Package 4.0, you'll find the signature Lawnmower 4.0, this electric trimmer. It's designed to trim hair on loose skin. The advanced skin-safe technology reduces cuts and nicks all over. It also comes equipped with a 4,000K LED spotlight that will shine a light to the promised land 2022 looks to be. In the new product that needs no introduction, the Ultra Premium Body Wash from Manscaped, it solves all 3 for the perfect addition to your daily grooming routine. But in the shower, this body wash smells great too. It's cologne infused with aloe vera and sea salt to keep your skin feeling clean, nice, and moisturized. Kick discomfort and poor hygiene to the curb this year and use the best tools for the job. Whether your resolution is to work out more or to travel to new places, be sure to travel to manscaped.com for our exclusive offer. It's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with the free shipping. At manscaped.com, use the code PFF. It's new year, new me in 2022 with Manscaped. I mean, look, they're kicking off the year the right way with a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate manscaped.com sponsoring the show. All right, let's go to I know we talked a little NFC. We're bouncing around here. Let's go Raiders 23, Colts 20. I don't know. Did this ultimate result surprise you here? The Raiders are still alive. Unless they're most likely in a play-in game, right? The NFL has redone their schedule for Week 18. it's Raiders-Chargers on Sunday Night Football. There is a scenario where both teams, the game doesn't actually mean anything, which is a little risky for the NFL. But the Raiders are here, man. They're in the playoff picture, and what a huge win. Every time you think the Raiders are done, they're sticking around, and they've got, a huge win against the Colts. It's 23-20. Could have been even worse. Carson Wentz with the coveted turnover-worthy touchdown. You talk about Stafford's heave into coverage. Wentz's heave paid off into double coverage. The turnover-worthy touchdown, but it wasn't enough. The Raiders moved to 9-7, and the Colts fall to 9-7. This was a huge game, not only for the Raiders, but obviously the Colts losing. And the Colts were that team. You don't want to play them in the playoff. Well, they just lost essentially a playoff game here.
Yeah, I was surprised by this result. I didn't think that the Raiders had enough offense to get this done, given what I assumed that the Colts were going to put up. You're right. That was one of the most hilarious touchdown passes you're going to see. That was less the decision made sense, right? Unlike the Stafford one, there is a frame you can pause on that Carson Wentz heave to the end zone where, yeah, okay, I understand why you were taking this shot. That makes perfect sense. Like at one point, he's escaping the pocket, there's pressure, and T.Y. Hilton's got his hand up running between two deep players, and he's going to have like a step on them. He's going to get behind them. Problem is, Wentz just can't get the ball there by the time he sees it and decides to throw. Like he's throwing that ball on the run from just the Raiders side of the 50, and it just dies on him. It just doesn't get to the goal line. The two Raiders defenders that T.Y. Hilton has split and is running beyond kind of converge on this ball and just take each other out. And the ball just ricochets to T.Y. Hilton, who's standing behind them watching this unfold as the ball is not getting to him. The rare turnover-worthy touchdown. You don't see it very often. Not just touchdown, but touchdown bomb. You don't see it very often, but it shows up, and there it was for Carson Wentz. And so when you consider that accounts for like 50 of Carson Wentz's yards, right? The single biggest play and like a third of his yards in the game were a turnover-worthy play, just a blind heave into double coverage that ended up getting lucky. It kind of shows what he was doing the rest of the time. You're essentially saying there's now 100 extra yards that Wentz is responsible for in this game on 28 other dropbacks. And that's reaching the point where, okay, that's problematic. Like, Carson Wentz had been playing well this year generally, and outside of the implosion games, the torrential rainstorm in San Francisco, the just random disaster at Tennessee, outside of those games, you're saying, Wentz has been playing a pretty clean brand of football and been generally efficient moving the ball. This was the kind of game, like, you can't have this game if you're going to be, if you're going to be the team that makes the playoffs off the back of a powerful ground game and, a different style of offense. You still need a quarterback playing at a certain level, and that level is higher than Wentz showed in this game.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird game, too, like when you go back and look through it, because Derek Carr put the ball in harm's way a couple times. He had a couple picks. He had a fumble in there as well. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays. So it wasn't exactly a great quarterback matchup, for either side. I want to give a shout-out to Isaiah Rodgers. He had a great interception in this game as well. The cornerback for the Colts, 7th-round pick, who just continues to flash. It didn't matter, obviously, in the outcome, but he's had a pretty good season. It looks like a pretty nice find for the Colts. But, again, a weird game, right? You have Jonathan Taylor doing he picked up his 100 yards on 20 carries and found the end zone, but just not enough offense from the Colts. Wentz had nothing through the air, about halfway through the game. You didn't get you just didn't get production. Like, T.Y. Hilton's only catch was that 45-yarder, right? So you're not getting that outside production at receiver from Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton in this game. So I've been crediting the Colts all season, man. Hey, the Pittman's emerging and the Colts are putting a ton of points on the board and all this stuff. And the weakness I thought they might have coming into the year, they'd hit it for the most part. I think you kind of saw that in this game, though, where you're just not getting Wentz and true outside threats on the same page and working well together. And then on the other side, for the Raiders, I think, they needed somebody to step up in this receiving core. That's been their issue since the Ruggs incident and since Darren Waller went down. And it's Zay Jones who steps up with 8 catches for 120 yards. That's huge for the Raiders. Just to be able to have him, Jones has been just so inconsistent throughout his career. He was an excellent high volume pass catcher in college. He's been really inconsistent with the Bills, with the Raiders in his NFL career, but a big game for him to complement the great Hunter Renfrow, of course, who had the only touchdown for the Raiders. Just again, an odd game where the passing attacks were really inconsistent, but Derek Carr ends up making just enough plays, overcoming some of those earlier mistakes.
Yeah, I've been impressed by the receivers generally for the Raiders and Derek Carr kind of stepping up and getting it done despite the players that are supposed to make this offense work. Like Zay Jones and Hunter Renfrow are both going to have excellent grades from this game, and they've been the players that Derek Carr's been left with, right? With no Darren Waller and with Henry Ruggs removed from this offense, Deshaun Jackson hasn't made the kind of impact that you would have expected he could make in replacing that Henry Ruggs role. And obviously Darren Waller was the high volume guy that made everything go. It's been left to those two guys, and they have impressed. Like I tweeted yesterday that I don't understand how Hunter Renfrow works, but he does. Like he gets open, he makes plays. He doesn't have a huge amount of size, speed, physicality. His quickness is fine, but it's not like otherworldly. You're not looking at this guy and going, oh, look, this is Tyreek Hill levels of uncoverable in a tight area. He sort of generally, moves to the right place, but you look at it and you're like, I don't understand why that's successful. But it is. Like he makes plays, and Derek Carr is good enough that he's consistently dropping the ball into tight buckets. And okay, he's not playing as well as he did when the players that he was targeting were like much better, and he had a bigger margin for error, but he's still dropping a few in every single game, and that's enough. And remember, like Derek Carr and this entire offense is working behind an offensive line that isn't good, right, and is actually pretty problematic. And they have at least 3 legitimate liabilities in terms of pass blocking, in terms of run blocking, and that's why, Josh Jacobs doesn't look like the guy he looked earlier in his career. So they are working with this pretty distinct drag factor on the offensive line and still able to get stuff done.
On the Renfrow point that you made, right? The game-winning touchdown is Carr to Renfrow in the fourth quarter. The offensive line and the backs really did a nice job picking up a blitz from the Colts. Carr did one of those things Peyton used to do really well is when the edge collapses. When the defensive line is not keeping contained well, Peyton did a really good job of moving out of the pocket, right? He didn't want to, but he did when he needed to. Carr gets out of the pocket despite it being clean. And Renfrow, you're right. Like, he didn't do anything special other than he just like win one with his hands, right? Yeah. Just kind of like wins with his hands, separates in the end zone. He just knows how to get open, no matter how. It doesn't matter how. Renfrow just does get open. Him and Carr do have a great connection, which does make the Raiders, intriguing going forward. When Darren Waller's out there, when they do figure out who their deep threat is. Again, they have got players that can win at each level, and when you have Zay Jones playing a game like this too, it does make the Raiders pretty dangerous. So impressive win for them. So both teams are 9-7. Doesn't feel that way because the Colts have been a little bit flashier in how they got there, but both teams are 9-7. Technically, the Raiders, well, here's what we have. 3 teams at 9-7, the Colts, Chargers, and Raiders. If the Colts lose to the Jaguars, now that's a big if, but if the Colts lose to the Jaguars on Sunday during the day, the Colts are out, I believe, right? Yeah, the Colts are out, and then the Chargers and Raiders could both be in the playoff picture. They would both be in the playoff picture, perhaps playing for nothing on Sunday Night Football. But right now, it's those 3 teams at 9-7, Colts, Chargers, and the Raiders, all still alive here in the AFC.
Darius Leonard is just a turnover machine this season.
Got it again. Got
the peanut punch again, and also had just dropped into space in zone coverage, found work, found where the threat was, and got himself between the intended target and the quarterback. That guy is just turning the ball over at a freakish rate relative to anybody else other than Trayvon Diggs, and he's not getting the level of opportunity that Trayvon Diggs is in terms of, targets from a cornerback. Like, I think in terms of sheer turnover volume, he's having as impressive a season as Diggs, and his baseline of the other stuff is higher.
I made this point on Twitter a few weeks ago, too. I think Leonard, if you watch Colts games closely, he's one of those linebackers like Ray Lewis, like Luke Kuechly, calling out what the offense is doing all the time. Every linebacker is adjusting, but Darius Leonard is like they're running a toss. I mean, he is ahead of the game, unlike any linebacker I think I've seen since Luke Kuechly. And it doesn't always show up in every play, but it's one of those years where you're starting to see it, and I think you're going to find Leonard is one of those guys who is always around the ball going forward in his career because he's still young, and it's really impressive what he's doing for sure. All right, let's get to some of the let's go Buffalo 29, Atlanta 15. Buffalo Bills. If I told you Josh Allen was going to go 11 for 26 for $120 and 3 interceptions, the good old passer rating of 17, but the Bills are still going to win by 14, cover the spread. That's
the hilarious part. It's like this game, like weird stuff was happening through the entirety of this game. It was like, oh, this is how a game like this ends up close, or, Atlanta gets a freakish upset win, and Buffalo still ended up covering a monster point spread anyway. But I think it was the first drive of the game, Atlanta stalls out, has to punt the ball away, and then safety on a muffed punt, immediately they put up, Buffalo doesn't get it. They concede the 2 points, and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be one of those games. Kyle Pitts pulls a hamstring just running across the field randomly. There's a tipped interception. There's also some bad plays by Josh Allen in there as well. But you're like, yeah, this is one of those games where it's sort of set up to go in that direction. And then ultimately, if your team is good as Buffalo, it's really hard to just stop them for 60 minutes. Eventually them being a lot better than you is going to play out, and they're going to start pulling away.
Yeah, Allen did a lot of his damage as a runner. He had 15 carries for 81 yards. He had the 3 interceptions, not all of them on him, as you mentioned, tip pass and some weird stuff in there. But early in the game, so it's a snowy game, and I was joking. I'm out on Matt Ryan in the snow and Buffalo and all that stuff. And yeah, that was, at least that take was right. But early in the game, Allen was whipping the ball around the field. He's throwing deep outs and comebacks. Everything looks fine. And then it got to a point like Stephon Diggs drops a touchdown. And I'm like, dude, I think Allen was throwing the ball too hard. On a lot of he had some open touchdown opportunities that he just missed or were dropped. And I don't think the weather was an issue for Allen throwing the ball. I just think he was throwing the ball too hard sometimes because it's tough to catch. He's got to throw more catchable ball, Sam.
I've got a rule change I want to pitch you. See if you like this one.
Oh boy.
Right? Sometime late in the game, Matt Ryan takes off, scrambles, rushes for a touchdown, scores the touchdown, gets up, and essentially taunts, right? So stares right at the Buffalo Bills defender and is like, yeah, I got the wheels. Then they review it. It turns out he didn't actually get in at all. So they take the touchdown off the board, but the taunting penalty still counts. So he gets moved all the way back, and he's no longer got a chance of scoring, and that's like game over, right? What if the play that caused you to taunt in the first place gets taken off the board? It feels like the taunting penalty should as well, right? If I hadn't scored, I wouldn't have taunted him. Therefore, that didn't happen either. Take it all off.
I don't know, because if you lack the self-awareness that you didn't actually get into the end zone and you taunted,
but you thought you did,
but you were wrong.
But they called it touchdown at the time.
This is like I won't even say it. Like unearned runs in baseball. As you know, as soon as there's like an error,
of course,
every run you give up the rest of that inning, once there's 2 outs, it's all unearned. I can give up 10 runs. They don't even count. It doesn't count against my ERA.
That's what
so
I'm saying.
So if you're saying the touchdown didn't count, therefore the taunting didn't count. What am I even taunting for? I'm down at the 1.
Exactly.
What am I taunting for?
That's what I'm saying.
I would consider it. We'll throw it to the rules committee this offseason. I'm going to ask Dean. I'm going to ask Dean Blandino next time we break bread together, which is never. But I will. I'll ask Dean if we could do that. Devin Singletary rushes for $110 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So, look, Bills fans, every now and again, they're asking, hey, can we run the ball a little bit more? Can we take a little bit of pressure off Josh Allen? Does this look, the Falcons aren't good. They're not good. They're 7-9. It feels like a fraudulent 7-9. But, you win with on the ground a little bit in the snow. It's January in Buffalo. They're going to have a home playoff game likely if they can win against the Jets next week. And you win despite Josh Allen, again, with a 17 passer rating. That is the lowest passer rating since, remember, that Bears-Panthers game? I think it was Todd Collins versus Jimmy Clausen from like 2010 or something. Where it was just atrocious. I think it's the lowest passer rating in a win since that point. So is that good for the Bills?
Oh, yeah, great. That taunting penalty, by the way, was genuinely like pretty determinative in terms of this game. Like it's 15-29 at the point where Ryan thinks he's run it in. If they score, at that point, they can get it to 22-29. They can make it a 7-point game if they get the extra point. And they rule them down at the 1, but the taunting penalty takes it back 15. So it suddenly becomes 3rd and goal from the 16-yard line. And then they don't, so then they incomplete pass, 4th and goal from the 16. They go for it on 4th and goal because, there's only 5-6 minutes left and you're done. So that taunting penalty, now, don't taunt, but the taunting rule is dumb. So what the hell? I'm just saying that the man wouldn't have taunted anybody if he hadn't broken the plane. Therefore, you should take it off the board and let him away with it. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, yeah, I would rather the rule that, look, the Falcons don't really have a chance in this game. Can we just do something to make this a little bit more exciting, right? It's a 2-point spread. It's a 2-touchdown spread, and the Falcons are going to be within 1 score. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. Is that legal?
Yeah. This is one, though. So whereas I think you were trying to make this point before with Stafford, that it's a good thing that they're winning games despite Stafford heaving the ball at defenders. I think it might actually be kind of true with Josh Allen. Not because it's good that Josh Allen started throwing the ball at defenders, but because Josh Allen actually does have different ways to win that Stafford doesn't have available to him. Like when the things go to hell, Josh Allen is still carrying this team on his shoulders on the ground, right? He's still rushing for big plays. This game is the Bills' offense is built on Josh Allen's shoulders, and he has as broad a spectrum of ways to win as any quarterback in the NFL in terms of how he can get it done. And if he's going to play badly as a passer, it doesn't necessarily mean this offense still can't function and put up a lot of points. And he will be the driving force behind that. It's just he's going to be running for big plays and carrying the team that way. I do think that there's an extent to which, the spread in this game was interesting because you're Atlanta was 7-8 coming into this game. And okay, their points differential was disastrous and all these kinds of things, but they were not a terrible team. And Vegas looked at this and went, "Oh, the Bills are going to blow them the hell out." And they went into the game. They immediately started conceding weird points, and Josh Allen didn't play well at all. And they still covered the spread. I think this is the kind of game where, if Matthew Stafford had that kind of game and the Rams had still won by 14, maybe I think that the argument would still be there. That's what the Bills did. So I think there is an argument to say that they winning, not just scraping by, but winning comfortably despite Josh Allen not playing particularly well, I think is important.
Yeah, 90.5 rushing grade for Josh Allen, and it was part design game, part scrambles, but I think that point's the good one, right? He can win on the ground, and boy, he's just exciting, man. I've come around. I think Josh Allen is the John Elway that people talked about, for better or for worse, right? The old John Elway completion percentages and all that stuff. You have a game like this where he's 11 for 26, but he also he threw the ball 55, 60 yards in the air, barely tipped away in the end zone, just for fun, just an absolute laser beam, incomplete. He's got the best incompletions in the NFL. Love watching Josh Allen now. All in on that guy. All right, let's talk Patriots 50, Jaguars 10. You have 30 seconds.
I'm just sad that we didn't get to see Urban Meyer experience this game from the sideline. When New England crossed the 50 barrier, the sad Urban face would have been amazing. Like, can you imagine him? He might have done the Antonio Brown thing and just walked out of the game midway through, like found himself a bar to hole up in if he'd been stuck there during this game. It was disastrous. And you kind of felt sorry for Trevor Lawrence that it not only did it go badly, but it went badly pretty freaking quickly. And you got a guy who's already struggling making plays, trying to look in any way, shape, or form good. And now he's in a crappy situation trying to chase this thing the whole game. You talk about setting players up for success. Like, this was setting Lawrence up for failure. And, yeah, I mean, he failed again.
We would have had the hands in head, sulky look.
No, hands would have gone in the pockets. Hands would have gone in the pockets, and it would have just been like, ugh. Like, it would have been like that face for the whole game.
But it also would have been the same face that Urban was pulling off when they were down a touchdown in week 2 of the preseason. But that's fine. Yeah, the Patriots, they've now put up 50 a couple times against the Jaguars and the Jets. I will say this Patriots team does know how to bully bad teams. The Jaguars also had about 20 players on the COVID list. So this is a Sam zero takeaways game other than the Patriots can dominate. The other takeaway I would have is Mac Jones was coming off a game against the Bills, which meant 1,000 times more. But he didn't throw the ball well in New England in December, January, right? He threw, for whatever it's worth. It's against the Jaguars. They were out leveraging the Jaguars defensively, and Mac had a lot of open receivers. But he threw the ball a lot better. Yeah. And maybe his best throw was a deep corner route that gets dropped, right? And he completed over 73% of his passes. So Mac Jones bouncing back, and I think he just continues to show, once you start to doubt him a little bit, he knows how to bounce back. Once you start to think, okay, maybe he can't do this, he's a pretty good player, right? And Mac Jones, I think it was an important answer. Not that they put up 50, but just throwing the ball, Mac Jones looked pretty good in a January game in New England where it was a little, misty and not the best weather.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think it means too much that Jones had this kind of game, but I think it would have meant something significant if he hadn't. Like, if Mac Jones had gone out there and had another bad to not great game, and now you were looking at this run and sort of saying, okay, New England were dominating when Mac Jones was playing well. All of a sudden, late in the season, in the bad weather, his game starts to fall off, and now you're just not the same team you were. You're not chasing for the number 1 seed. You're just a kind of playoff team that's going to get bounced early. You don't have the quarterback. The fact that he was able to go out there and have a big game and a good game, like look more like Mac Jones from earlier in the season, I think is important just because it meant he didn't have another rough one. Like, if that would have been the problem. The fact that, the fact that the Jags are bad, that they were battered by COVID, that all these things, it sort of tempers how much you can take from it. But just the fact that he didn't have another bad game in that sequence, I think is important.
We'll get into all the scenarios on the Thursday preview show, but as of right now, the Bills are the 4 seed and the Patriots are the 5 seed. There's a very good chance that that's how it ends up, meaning wild card round is New England going back to Buffalo, where Mac Jones dropped back just 3 times on Monday Night Football. So Buffalo in mid-January could be in the cards for Mac Jones and the Patriots. Both teams 10-6, but the Bills have the tiebreaker over the Patriots because of the best win percentage in division games.
I think would be a spectacular playoff game.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. A great storyline and hashtag fun to watch if New England has to go back to Buffalo in January. Let's go. Chicago Bears, 30 seconds on the Bears and Giants, which, it's about 2 minutes, but we get 30 seconds. Bears 29. Giants 3.
I tweeted this out that if the Giants offense was a racehorse, there would have been a white tent erected over it and a guy walking that way with a shotgun. Like, this offense, they would have been better if they just lined up Saquon Barkley in the shotgun and just said make something happen every play. I'm not even going to call a play. Just do what you feel like. We're going to snap the ball and then you go where the space is. That's how this offense is going to work for the next 57 minutes of this game. This was just. They had 2 turnovers in a 6-play sequence to open the game. Then a safety when the offensive line was destroyed so much that the running back just ran into a brick wall a yard into the end zone. Mike Glennon at the half was 1 for 2 with the incompletion being complete to the Bears. So he had one pass completed to his own team and one pass completed to the opposition. The Giants finished the game, I believe, with minus 10 net passing yards, which is the fewest since Ryan Leaf had that like absolute joke of a game in 1998 where he had he completed like 1 of 15 passes. That's the level we're talking about here from Mike Glennon.
1 for 15.
And this offense.
In PFF terms, Mike Glennon also had 4 turnover-worthy plays on 17 dropbacks. Almost 25% of his dropbacks, exactly 23.5% to be exact, were turnover-worthy plays. How do you get to negative passing yards? Of course, in the NFL, you've got the regular passing yards. Mike Glennon had 24. And then they lost 34 on sacks. Those go to the team passing yards,
Beautiful.
As they should, not like in college where they become negative rushing yards, which is ridiculous. Negative 10 net passing yards for the Giants. And all the Bears needed was Darnell Mooney to run through the back of the end zone for a touchdown, use his speed. Dalton found him, and that's all they needed. The Bears, who crushed the Giants. The Giants don't care. They have the Bears pick.
Sure.
So they've got the Bears' first-round pick, and they're really winners in the end here.
Generally, so EPA per play is one of those statistics that's a little bit abstract in most people's minds, but generally speaking, it's a decimal of something between 0 and 1 in either direction, right? So, for example, Chicago doesn't have a particularly good passing attack. They averaged an EPA per play of minus 0.248 in this game, right? So
that's horrendous.
Yes, really bad, but just for context, we are talking essentially a quarter of a point per play in the wrong direction as a passing offense. That's terrible. The Giants offense, and I have never in my life seen a number like this, the Giants passing offense averaged minus 2.52 EPA per play. So essentially every pass play the Giants ran netted them 2.5 points in the wrong direction.
Luckily, they only had 17 dropbacks, right? So if they kept dropping back, they'd end up in negative points.
Yes, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, I haven't. We need to look that up and see where that landed. Good job, Bears defense. Maybe.
No,
Saquon Barkley ran for 100 yards.
Yeah, their rush offense actually averaged minus 0.004, which is that's not bad
beautiful
for a rushing performance.
The best takeaway here is that the beautiful stat of when player X rushes for 100, it's always a win.
Yes.
Well, Saquon ran for 102 and they lost and scored 3 points. So we got a nice L in that when a team rushes for 100 yards column.
By the way, we need to start this needs to start framing the Daniel Jones discussion, right? Daniel Jones didn't play well this year, and certainly not the later the year went on when the worse the situation got. On the other hand, he didn't go out there and just embarrass, just implode the way Mike Glennon did in this game. There was a baseline of respectability with Daniel Jones at quarterback that is not there with the people that aren't Daniel Jones.
I'm with you, Daniel Jones apologist. I've done a few interviews where people have asked me about the Giants' future and Joe Judge and all that stuff, and I try to be very diplomatic with this stuff. I don't like to, sometimes you put a bad stat out there and people send you death threats, so you just got to be careful with stuff sometimes. And, I've very diplomatic answer with Joe Judge. Boy, does he have some questionable takes, though. I mean, you think Matt Nagy, every time he gets a mic in front of him, is digging himself a bigger hole. Joe Judge is claiming that there are just his phone's ringing off the hook from former Giants who are making way more money who just wish they were back in New York. So just the quotes that he is putting out there are just worse and worse. He said we were all going to get fired in 2018, and look, we dug ourselves out of that hole and recovered. He was with the Patriots. Who was getting fired?
See, I think the problem. So Matt Nagy's problem is that every answer he gave was just horrendous. Is just horrendous. It's what? Stop talking. Every time you say something, it's terrible. Joe Judge apparently went on an 11-minute diatribe on an answer to a question, and the problem is people transcribe this stuff now, or it's like it gets recorded. Like, it doesn't just disappear. People don't just get bored when you keep talking for 11 minutes and stop listening and go away. Like, they actually start parsing the words you say. So it's like that, there was a West Wing quote where they're like, they're just trying, something gets raised about like a guy they're pitching for Supreme Court justice or whatever. They're like, oh, I think if you take a close look at this guy's record, it speaks for itself. And they're like, and they did. Like, oh no, like we just thought this would make them go away. We didn't actually think they would do that. Like, I think Joe Judge just talks and doesn't thinks that if he just keeps talking, the questions will go away. Like, they'll forget what they originally asked, and there won't be any issues anymore. But he talks, and people record what he's saying, and they start looking at it. And particularly when it gets tweeted out sentence by sentence, everyone, people look at the one single sentence in this diatribe, what are you even talking about? So I think that's his issue, is that he's not actually paying attention to the words that are coming out of his mouth, and other people are, and that's where the problems show up.
And me, Sam, I'm anti-quote, here's a quote with no context, and everybody quote tweets it and attacks it and all that stuff. But Bill Barnwell, I think, went in and did the research on who are the Giants who are actually making more money, are in a different. It was Dalvin Tomlinson. And
I did look at that myself. Yeah, the players of the Giants that simply the players that they lost in free agency is not a list that would have made that quote look any better.
So Dalvin Tomlinson is the one guy that might be calling Joe Judge, saying, I guess, and who knows? I mean, we'll get to the Vikings soon. That could be the case. We've hit the final week of the football regular season, and college football is heading into the national championship, and DraftKings Sportsbook has an unbelievable offer to get all fans in on the action for this exciting time on the football calendar. New customers can bet just $5 on any football team to win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. Let's wind down the season with a big win. If Sportsbook isn't yet available in your state, you can still find your way to the winner's circle. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings daily fantasy football contests, and DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. So listen, you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any football team, that's college or pro, and you win $200 in free bets if they're victorious. It's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. If you've been hesitant getting in on the action over at DraftKings, I don't know how many more of these we're going to have. So I suggest you do it. DraftKings Sportsbook app. Promo code is PFF. All right, let's go. Tampa Bay Bucks 28, New York Jets 24. This had the makings of a massive upset. But Tom Brady and the Bucs lead the comeback. We'll talk about that, the game-winning touchdown in a minute here, but some questionable play calling from the Jets to get to that point. The Bucs were down 24-10. They get it to 24-20 in the fourth quarter. Then the Jets have a pretty good drive going. They've got a pretty good drive to run out the clock, Sam, and then Bucks have no timeouts left. The Jets have a 4th and 2. There are two options: kick a field goal to go up 7, give the ball back to Tom Brady with just over 2 minutes left, 7-point lead, or 4th and 2, you can go for it and pretty much seal the deal, right? I don't think the Jets would then probably run a couple plays, kick a late field goal. Bucks would have a 7-point deficit with about 15, 20 seconds left, I think. Jets go for it on 4th and 2. Don't hate the decision. I do hate the QB sneak call on 4th and 2 where Zach Wilson ran to nowhere. Zach Wilson played a pretty good game, threw the ball pretty well for the most part. The Jets offense looked as good as they have in weeks, but boy, was that a bad decision.
Yeah, it's another good example of there's two components to these decisions. There is yes or no, go for it or not go for it. And then there is, once you've decided to go for it, what are you running? And the Jets decide to go for it, and I think, again, the context being you're giving the ball to Tom Brady with time to work, and what happened shows you exactly the perils of that, right? Like, the fact that Tom Brady did what he did at the end of this game is precisely why the Jets went for it and didn't want to give him the ball back. So I don't have a problem with that. But, again, the issue being, that's fine, go for it. but what is the call you're going to show up for? And like fourth and short, a short one, QB sneak. Okay, QB sneak against Tampa Bay, a little bit more questionable. Like Tampa Bay has this dominant interior run defense, and they were playing for that play. Like they lined up with 5 down linemen. They were expecting that but this was 4th and 2, like a full 2, and you try and sneak for 2 yards. Like that's just a bad call. Like anywhere. The only time you ever do that is if you line up. It's usually not called. It's just you line up, and it turns out they're like giving you an A gap, right? They've lined up, like the defense is lined up in a way where they're simply not defending one of the gaps up the middle, and you basically audible it. You quick snap, you goose the center, and you're like, let's go. They're giving us 2-3 yards here. We'll take it. You don't line up like in a kind of sneak formation. The defense knows you're doing that and then expect that you can bulldoze one of the best defensive lines in the NFL 2 yards off the line for a small quarterback to be able to sneak it. That's just a bad decision. Like, that's a bad call.
Yeah, it was. And again, and let's go back to the reasoning. Here's why I think the decision was fine. If you make a good play call and you get it, again, the game is virtually over, right? The Bucs have just the 2-minute warning to stop the clock. The worst case scenario for the Jets there probably is kicking a field goal, having a 7-point lead, and the Bucs have no timeouts and the entire field to go. If you don't get it, which was the case, the Bucs still had to go 93 yards with no timeouts. Now, yeah, Tom Brady's on the other side, and he executed it and did it. And I thought it was an incredible. You talk about the MVP that you love and MVP moments and all that stuff. I do think Brady's been overlooked because of his best play coming early in the season. I thought this was an MVP caliber moment. They went 93 yards on 7 or 8 plays with about 2 minutes left, no timeouts, in that last game-winning throw to Cyril Grayson, who was on the practice squad 2 weeks ago. Grayson's been awesome the last 2 weeks. He's crazy fast. But that was what Brady's doing, pumping open a go ball and putting it in a perfect spot for a game-winning touchdown. Brady leading the league in game-winning drives this year. I think I would give him the MVP over Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if it'll happen, but incredible final drive by the Bucs, all while their star receiver was in a cab, shirtless, and a lot of drama in the middle of this game as Antonio Brown just left the field. Yeah, and there was a lot going on here in New York.
Let's get to the Brown thing at the end, so we don't spend the entire time on this game talking about Antonio Brown. Brady was fantastic, executed everything he had to do late in that game to get it done. I was impressed by Zach Wilson for the first time in a long time. Like, look, when it was Zach Wilson versus Trevor Lawrence with the Jags, Zach Wilson did flash a little bit in that game, but it really felt like a construct of Jacksonville's defense more than it felt like Zach Wilson. And that's kind of been backed up this week. The same things happened with New England hanging 50 on them. Like, the Jags just suck. They're a disaster right now. This game, though, like, this was Tampa Bay's defense and Zach Wilson. So, okay, there was one, really nice play in there to Keelan Cole, I think, like a tight bullet into tight coverage. That was nice. But there were some more plays in here where Wilson just looked more comfortable, like was making quick adjustments, was sort of not panicking. That I think is the theme. Like, in preseason, Wilson looked cool, calm, collected, in rhythm. Everything he did just sort of felt easy and natural. And then he got to the regular season and everything felt panicked and under pressure, even when it wasn't, pressure in the sense of pass rushers. It just felt, hard, difficult. This was the first game where it started looking more like the preseason, where Wilson just looked more comfortable with what he was doing. And even when he was put under pressure in terms of pass rushers, it wasn't panic. It was sort of more measured response to this stuff, and his adjustments were good. And if you're looking now at these rookie quarterbacks as the season winds down, particularly the ones in bad situations, and you're saying, look, there's nothing good coming out of this year for Trevor Lawrence, like nothing at all. Like, just get the hell out of this year, try and fix it in the offseason and hope it looks better next year. There are signs of improvement and signs of encouragement, I think, coming out of Zach Wilson of late. And that has to be good for the Jets. Like, there's not a lot to take out of this year for them. But the fact that Zach Wilson right at the end is starting to trend upwards can't be bad, right? It doesn't mean it's good. Like, we've seen this before from quarterbacks and they haven't continued into the next year, right? Maybe this is the Sam Darnold end of the year where he had 2-3 games to finish the season. You're like, oh, Darnold's going to be great next year. But maybe it is, a sign that the future is bright with the Jets when he gets his receivers healthy and when that offensive line takes another step forward and just the talent level around him is better.
No, I agree. I agree with all that stuff. It might just be a Jets thing, though, because I used to call Geno Smith Mr. Week 17 when Week 17 was the last week of the year. Geno Smith had some really good ends to the season. I agree on Zach Wilson completely. I thought he looked much more comfortable in this game. I don't know if you've watched any of JT O'Sullivan's former NFL quarterback. He's got the QB School on YouTube. I got sucked into the Jets, his Zach Wilson review against the Dolphins a couple weeks ago. It was just really good. I like the way JT breaks it down, but he was just breaking down how he just kept saying, this is just bad ball. I love what he's just got a really soothing voice to say, this is just bad football. This is just bad ball. And it was about the Jets offense. It was about the play calling. It was about pass protection, a little of Zach Wilson. But what he had highlighted is that the situation around Wilson, specifically play calls, what they're putting on his plate, there's a lot of stuff that was just challenging for a young quarterback, in addition to Wilson not playing great. This one did look like Wilson wasn't as overwhelmed and did make a lot of plays. For the Bucs, they moved to 12-4. They're pretty much locked into the number 2 or 3 seed now in the NFC, but Packers locked up number 1, so there's no chance for a bye for the Bucs, Rams, or Cowboys anymore. So the Bucs will play the Panthers next week and just try to, jockey for positioning here in the NFC. Antonio Brown.
There's one last point.
Go ahead.
This was an interesting game because right from the get-go, Tampa Bay's much vaunted rush defense was giving up giant plays left, right, and center. Like right at the start, Michael Carter had a big break through the line, was clean through, and actually ended up tripping himself up rather than going the distance, which was particularly frustrating for Jeff Smith. Had made a great block down the sideline. We talk about wide receiver blocking sometimes. It's not massively important, but it does tend to be the difference when it happens between big plays and touchdown plays. They're the guy that springs you the last 20 yards that gets you to the end zone. And Jeff Smith had done this incredible job, got his man, blocked him, and then Carter trips himself up and doesn't get to the end zone. Now nobody was more bummed on the play than Jeff Smith, who understood that his block had done enough to get the guy the touchdown, and Carter ends up not taking advantage of it. But the Jets offense was averaging a ton of yards, 5.8 yards per carry, I think, was doing a really good job. And that's not something you normally see against this Bucs defense.
Yeah, I mean, we were projecting the Bills' performance and the Rams' performance to the playoffs. I thought the Bucs, they had some COVID issues on defense.
Sure.
But yeah, there are some leaks in that Bucs defense that I don't think they were showing down the stretch last year. Granted, their defense had their worst game, I think, against the football team in the playoffs, and then they kind of clamped down a little bit more. But I think they're a little bit more leaky on the defensive side of the ball this year than last year's Super Bowl run, and that certainly could come back to bite when you're playing the Rams, Packers, Cowboys, or whoever they run into in the playoffs, or the Niners. And so the Antonio Brown situation, he takes his shirt off, leaves. He had 5 targets, 3 catches early in the game. He had a bunch of incentives on the line. We thought that if he was there, with Chris Godwin out for the season, Antonio Brown was going to be the guy. He'd been the best receiver on the Bucs this year when healthy. And Bruce Arians claims that he said he told Antonio to get back in the game, and Antonio Brown didn't. And then Bruce told him to get off the sideline, and there was a video of Mike Evans trying to talk him out of it. Antonio Brown not only left the sideline, but he took his pads off, left them, took his shirt off, and walked off the field, waved, and apparently went right to a cab per Chris Myers.
Well, tried to get a cab and couldn't or something. Then
that's not easy. It's not easy getting a cab.
It's not easy. Look, Uber sometimes lets you down. Not that I'm hating on Uber in particular. I'm sure all of those,
Lyft will let you down. Cabs they'll all let you down, Sam.
I'm sure they'll all leave you hanging sometimes.
They could all let you down.
Absolutely. This is it's a tough situation, right? Because we're in this world now where you can't just call a guy crazy, you know? Like back, you don't have to go back that far where a guy could do things like this. And you're just like, oh, that guy's nuts, and move on, right? Everyone was agreed.
Don't go there, Sam.
Now, you know, we're in a world of who knows what the guy's dealing with. And Tom Brady in his press conferences was saying that he was dealing with some stuff, and, you know, we hope he gets the help he needs and all this kind of stuff. And like, nobody knows what Antonio Brown is going through. He might be dealing with some personal things. He might be dealing with some mental health issues. Who knows? None of us have any idea. None of us are inside the guy's head. All we can do is judge him by his actions. And his actions have been pretty consistently abhorrent, obnoxious, and deranged for years now, right? And there was a tweet, I can't remember who put it out, that, you know, Mike Tomlin dealing with Antonio Brown for like 9 years is one of the most impressive coaching performances in NFL history. Like the fact that this guy got as far as he did, and not just got as far as he did, but like he's one of the greatest receivers of all time. He's up there with Julio Jones as the best receiver of his generation. For him to last that long without this imploding on a weekly basis the way it has been impressive. But he has been fairly consistently enabled down the time as well. Like this is not the first incident. This is not the second incident. This is not the 12th incident. This is a long and documented history of abnormal behavior from Antonio Brown. And it's fairly consistently been either swept under the rug, or enabled, or actually rewarded with like a new opportunity somewhere. And what's interesting is that Bruce Arians and the Bucs are only like a week away from doing it again, right? Antonio Brown, when they first brought him into Tampa Bay, Bruce Arians is like, one mistake and he's out of here, right? This is his last chance. If he screws up one time, he's gone. And then they go on this run. They make the Super Bowl. They win a ring. Everybody's happy. Then Antonio Brown screws up. He does the fake vaccination card thing. And rather than Bruce Arians sticking with his word, he goes, well, actually, now we kind of need him, so he's going to stick around. The history has changed since I made that declaration. So effectively, one more, you know, tick on the idea that Antonio Brown can kind of do what he wants and he'll get away with it. And then, like, what is it, 1 week, 2 weeks later, this happens, and like this is the risk you run. And what becomes fascinating now is that we were just talking about how much the Bucs offense needs Antonio Brown now, right? No Chris Godwin. Brown is the guy that can replace what Chris Godwin does in terms of moving around, in terms of operating from the slot, route running savvy, all those things. And that's just blown up in the Bucs' faces. And they just struggle to get by the Jets. But I think this is a really important loss for them, and that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, from a football standpoint, when you bring in Antonio Brown, you understand what the on-field payoff is, the off-field risk. They won a Super Bowl last year. Now they don't have him for the playoff run, right? I mean, that is the risk that you inherit from a football standpoint. The one thing I'll say about the Bucs offense, Rashad Perryman came in, and then Cyril Grayson, who I mentioned, both guys really fast. And Antonio Brown is fast. He ran a 4.5 or whatever at the combine or whatever it was. But Antonio Brown is fast. He is a legitimate deep threat because of his game speed and on-field threat. But I do wonder if this Bucs offense, maybe without Godwin, actually has a speed element that they've picked up in Rashad Perryman and Cyril Grayson. We saw that a little bit in this game, but it's going to be a challenge without two of the better receivers, with Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown going forward for the Bucs. I'm sure everyone else will have plenty more on the Antonio Brown situation everywhere, every network throughout the week.
Do you think he's going to get a chance again anywhere?
I don't think so. I think it's
one
over.
of those.
I mean, so this year in particular, they said the Bucs can release him with a certain way to not let somebody pick him up. You know, Tom Brady was the guy that was kind of, he's going to live in my house. Like, Tom Brady was the guy that was going to reclaim him. That was his reclamation project, and it worked for a while. And I think this is too extreme after a lot of extreme things. This is, when we talked about the Urban Meyer thing, right? When Urban Meyer stayed in Cincinnati and got a lap dance from his non-wife. The thing that the football guys hated the most was that he didn't get on the plane with the team. This is you quit on your team while the Bucs had the football. Right? And you were part of the game plan. You'd already had 5 targets. Like nothing. We don't know what else had happened. You quit on your football team, not just quit and stayed on the sideline, but like in dramatic fashion, ripping your shirt and your pads off and all that stuff. So to me, that is like football guy, no. Whereas like fake vaccination card, all that stuff, it's just Antonio, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like from like a football guy standpoint, you shrug off a lot of that stuff. Oh, he froze his feet. Oh, who cares? But when you quit on your football team, that always feels like the final straw. So I do see this being the end of Antonio Brown in the NFL, but we'll see.
Yeah, I posted a poll on Twitter just asking, does Antonio Brown get another shot, yes or no? And 13.8% said yes, 86% no, which is way more dramatic than I thought it would be, actually. I thought it would be a lot more 50-50. And actually, given them the replies to that tweet were a lot more, he'll get another chance. Like, talent always wins out at the NFL. Like, look at his history already. Guys get endless chances in the NFL if they're good. But the actual responses were resoundingly no. And I kind of agree. It does feel like for all the things he's done, like this is the one thing you don't come back from in NFL circles, right? Just walking out on a team in game. And it was interesting, like the difference, a week ago, Bruce Arians was like, oh yeah, sure, he did a thing that, was really bad. On the other hand, we quite need him, so I don't care. And then this game, it was like, he's no longer a Buck. Like he's gone. There's no discussion. Bye-bye. Like we're done. So that's the difference. Like that kind of bailing on your team in game is the difference between, all these things are up for debate to just like, no, we already cut him. Like this is already a done deal.
Yeah, insubordination in game. That's why Bruce Arians, who's never, minced words at the end in his press conference, was like, yeah, Antonio Brown, no longer a Buck. It's not official yet, but I'm sure it'll become official at some point today. All right, let's go. Philadelphia 20, Washington football team 16. The Philadelphia Eagles are now in the playoffs. They're 9-7. They could be the 6 or the 7 seed, so they'll still be playing for something next week for seeding against the Dallas Cowboys in their season finale. But the Eagles have done it. They have bounced back this year and made the playoffs. Football team falls to 6-10. Of course, they were eliminated last week. But Eagles, nobody wants to play the Eagles, Sam, because of that rushing attack, even though it wasn't great yesterday. Defense been much better. It's a dangerous Eagles team.
What do you mean it wasn't great? The great Boston Scott was just racking up the touchdowns.
Boston Scott, 2 scores. Mr. Week 17 is really Boston Scott.
It looked for a minute. So remember, like Philadelphia essentially stole Washington's spot in those playoffs when Washington got ravaged by COVID and they played Philadelphia, and the Eagles kind of took over their spot. It looked for a second like Washington's sole purpose of the rest of the season was going to be to ruin Philadelphia's playoff spot, snatch a win late in this game. You can't get back into the spot. You're already eliminated, but you can at least screw it up for Philadelphia. So they're like driving late. Taylor Heineke with the ball. Can he go for the win? Overthrow, interception. Doesn't quite. I don't even know if it was his fault. Like it looked like the receiver got tripped up and kind of couldn't reach for the pass that might have been slightly too far in front of him anyway. But yeah, it was just. It's another game. Philadelphia is interesting because they are a style of team that I think a lot of playoff teams don't want any part of. And they're not alone in that. Philadelphia, San Francisco, Indianapolis, these teams are awkward styles for every playoff side. It's not – they're the teams that have kind of zigged while everybody else zagged and have pivoted to more of a run-heavy style of team and a power brand of football that not everybody is equipped particularly well to stop. On the other hand, they're not that good. You know what I mean? So, like, on the one hand, you're facing a difficult style of offense to deal with. On the other hand, you're facing a team that isn't great. So, it's sort of – it swings and roundabouts. And if that team, if it was a real problem team for the playoffs, it wouldn't take you till, like, the final couple of plays to beat a Washington team that's pretty bad right now.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Maybe we're overrating the unique style that they play. But I got to give the Eagles credit too. Just to, again, go back to preseason, envisioning, hey, if Jalen Hurts cuts down on his mistakes and they build the run game around him, and they also have the great Jordan Mailata, I'll take over. It's not Alejandro Villanueva anymore. I'm all on Jordan Mailata.
Wow,
that's the great. He's the real great. Sorry, Ali, you're getting old. It's Mailata's time right now. But the run blocking of Mailata, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, they're playing to their strengths. And again, my head's in February and March already. I'm already in off-season mode and team building mode. It's going to be a fascinating discussion with the Eagles and all their first-round draft capital. Jalen Hurts on a rookie contract and maybe building around him at least for a couple of years while he's cheap with more players. So they're not bad. They are a good team because they're 9-7. They're playing to their strengths. The defense went from allowing 75% completions to being a lot more difficult to throw against. And they don't. And even though they give up a high completion rate, they don't give up big plays. The Eagles are they're kind of extreme in everything that they do, Sam, whether it's the run-heavy approach now or whether it's the heavy zone coverage and not allowing big plays and keeping everything underneath. So, yeah, there is that element of where the Eagles are that is intriguing. And I think there's something to, if you give me Jalen Hurts at quarterback, what would you do? How would you build a team? And I think they've done a pretty good job of that this year for a team that looked like they were in full rebuild mode coming down from that 2017 Super Bowl team. They just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And they've accelerated the rebuild, I would say, by they found 9 wins with this roster. That's impressive for Nick Sirianni and company.
The good thing is that Mailata is also 6'8", so your type doesn't have to change. You can stick with the giant 6'8" people. You don't have to worry. He's got a lot more mass attached to him than Villanueva ever had. Villanueva was always more of that lanky 6'8", the former wide receiver, Army type of guy. Never, he filled out, but he never put on 360 pounds the way that Jordan Mailata has. That guy has embraced the offensive line lifestyle coming from the rugby background. But I like it. I think it's a good pivot to go away from the bad player and towards the good one.
I think I'm pivoting because my body type has also gone from Ali Villanueva closer to Mailata. My weight is probably closer to 360 now anyway, so
understandable.
Why not?
Yeah.
Eagles right now tied with the 49ers with a 9-7 record. Technically, the Niners are the 6th seed at this very moment. The Eagles are the 7th seed, but the Eagles have clinched. The Niners have not. The Eagles are in the playoffs.
We give a shout out to TJ Edwards.
Yeah.
The Eagles for a few years now have just had arguably the worst linebacker situation in the NFL, certainly one of the worst, just an absolute disastrous group of linebackers that were, terrible. And TJ Edwards comes in there and has really kind of solidified that spot. And he's a fascinating player because he graded really well in college. This guy was undrafted because he's one of those players that doesn't have the measurables at all, doesn't have the athleticism, doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the kind of wingspan that you like, none of the traits that gets these guys drafted in the first round. Edwards had none of them, but graded really well and was consistently good at the coverage stuff, which is like an area I think that if you don't have athleticism and size and range and all those kinds of things, it's really hard to be a good coverage player in today's NFL because, particularly at linebacker, because those guys are being put in a bind every single play, and every thing that the offense draws up is designed to make you take a half step in the wrong direction or hesitate. And if you do that, you can't get to where you're supposed to be, even if you are an athletic freak. Now, you take a guy who doesn't have the athleticism and the freakiness. You have to be so good at reading and diagnosing and understanding what's going on to offset the fact that you're going to be half a step late. And even when you set off, you're half a step late because you're slower than everybody else. Edwards has come in there as an undrafted guy, done really well on special teams, done really well in preseason, kind of earned himself a shot to start. And when he started, he's continued to be good. He's not the best linebacker in the world, but he consistently grades well in all areas. And as I say, for a guy that doesn't have those physical gifts, I think it's kind of good for the game to see people like that can still thrive, and it isn't just a game for people that run a 4-2 and all this kind of stuff. But he's also made a material impact on that defense.
I appreciate your TJ Edwards love. He's also one of those few linebackers who graded well and did not test well and actually backed up the grades, right? After we became a little gun shy early on because we had like the Deion Joneses of the world who were not really productive in college and were very good NFL linebackers based off athleticism and just getting better. All right, let's go 49ers 23, Houston Texans 7. Trey Lance goes 16 of 23 for 249. That's 10.8 yards per attempt. We got the full Trey Lance experience here, Sam, right? I mean, you see the big plays that he's able to create, either just as a run threat or throwing the ball down the field. You also have 2 turnover-worthy plays. One was an actual interception where he just locks on and throws the ball right to the corner. Another one was a turnover-worthy completion that goes through the defender's hands. And I think Brandon Ayuk, I think they still called it a catch, right?
Yeah.
Because, again, I saw it and then I turned away. And Brandon Ayuk toe tap along the sideline on the dropped interception. So is this 49ers offense better with Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo under center? Did we learn anything about that in this particular game?
No. It's really interesting because this at least obviously was encouraging. They win the game. The offense still has success. Trey Lance showed a lot of good. So there was an improvement over what we'd seen earlier in the year or in preseason where it just looked disastrous and like it wouldn't. Like as soon as Trey Lance came in, you would be like, oh God, we wish we had Jimmy G back. This showed that there is probably a higher ceiling with Trey Lance in this offense than Jimmy G. He made a couple of throws in this game that Jimmy G hasn't shown all season long. But you also got the flip side, which was those couple of turnover-worthy plays, and they were different. Like the first one, I think, was the read was okay. It was just you can't really make that throw in the NFL. Like that's a throw that works in the FBS, but NFL defenders are too good for that one. You're not going to be able to fit it in over the dude's head. Can't make it. Now, that's the kind of throw where if that's the mistake you need to get that one out of your system and realize that's not an option anymore, that's a good mistake to make now. The second one was more of a misread play where the NFL thrives in passing concepts in terms of putting defenders in just a high-low situation, right? A route concept on one side of the field where you've got a high option and a low option, one defender put in a bind, and you simply have to read where that guy is putting himself. And if he covers the high defender, you take the low. If he covers the low, you hit the high, all that kind of thing. So they put the defender in that high-low read, and he just took the wrong shot. He aimed for the high guy and not the low guy. Now, to be fair, even the high guy was an option, just not with the throw he attempted. Like, Brandon Ayuk ends up catching along the sideline. If he'd put some air under it and kind of thrown it another 5, 7, 10 yards down the field, he might have actually been able to hit Ayuk and it would have been fine. But he just tried to fit it in with a pass that wasn't really there and got away with it. But like the good stuff we saw from Trey Lance was really encouraging and showed, I think, a high end of his game that makes this offense even more dangerous for playoff teams than they were before that. And for a team like the 49ers that aren't as good as Green Bay or, one of the real Super Bowl contenders, you probably need to lean into the variance and the fact that it's probably not going to happen 4 times in a row, but you need a game where if your high end shows up, your high end wins because it's higher. I don't think you can win by just hoping that you're better than, Green Bay or Tampa Bay or whatever. So I think this was good for them.
It's a tough one because the San Francisco 49ers went to the Super Bowl and won an NFC championship with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing the ball, 8 times against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Now, the 2019 Packers, we said we didn't think they were very good, and I think they pale in comparison to last year's or this year's Packers team. So I think your point is a good one. Trey Lance, the thing I noticed, both of his touchdowns came out of the pocket, designed rollouts. One of them was in the red zone, and it's just like a little dump off to the flat. The other one was, you mentioned it to me first, and I didn't notice until I watched it 2 or 3 times. He throws the deep over route to Deebo Samuel, who remains awesome. And it looks like the ref was ready to pick it off. The ref breaks on the ball. He got out of the way so Deebo could catch it, break a tackle, get into the end zone. The thing I noticed, though, was when Lance comes out of the boot action, he is just so explosive and dynamic. And I think everything he does puts the defense in a bind in a way that Josh Allen puts a defense in the bind. But the same way Josh Allen, especially early career Josh Allen, will throw the ball to defenders or put the ball in harm's way or take too many negative plays. You'll take the good with the bad, but the variance is there, to your point, right? The fact that the Niners, I sent you a message too. I was wondering if the Matt Nagy detractors who think that Justin Fields has just been completely misused, wasted in Matt Nagy's offense, if they're watching this and it's like, well, Trey Lance has 2 touchdowns on rollouts. Get him out of the pocket. Do what they're doing with Trey Lance. Let Justin Fields, live in this better offense. I think you see elements of that, though, where Kyle Shanahan is great at creating big play opportunities. And now you'll have a run game element and the boot action element that's just a little bit more dangerous with Trey Lance than Jimmy Garoppolo. But we make the same thing. We make the same statements about Garoppolo. Like, what are these decisions he's making in the middle of the field, right? If you're going to get bad decisions from Jimmy G and from Trey Lance, why not at least get some more of those, downfield passes, those big-time throws that Jimmy Garoppolo has not had? And I think this is very much the conversation they were having last offseason in San Francisco, saying Jimmy Garoppolo or Mac Jones or Trey Lance, these are our options at number 3 overall, or when they moved to number 3, and they decided Trey Lance in the variance might be the way to go here.
That's the thing. Like, Jimmy G, if Jimmy G wasn't ever putting the ball in harm's way, it would be an interesting discussion. And that's kind of what they've been dealing with for a chunk of this season, where he went on that run where he didn't really play badly. He didn't put the ball in harm's way very much. And now you're saying, okay, we're not getting a ton of big plays. On the other hand, we're averaging like 8.5 yards per attempt, and he's not putting the ball in harm's way a bunch, so that puts us in a pretty good spot. But then that disappears the second he has like a couple of turnover-worthy plays in a game, because now you're like, all right, we're still averaging a lot of yards, but all of a sudden those negative plays offset a huge amount of positive. Now, if you bring in Trey Lance, you probably still have the couple of negative throws in there. On the other hand, the high end, like the potential to offset a turnover with a big chunk play, is massively higher with Trey Lance. Like, Jimmy Garoppolo has 9 big-time throws all season long in 14 games. And Trey Lance, like, he had 1 in this game, but the point is his average depth of target was like 5 yards higher than Jimmy G this season. Like, Jimmy G's average depth of target this year is 7.7 yards. Trey Lance in this game, I think, was at 12. And, his arm is capable of more things. He's more willing to be aggressive. You're just sort of seeing this. It is the danger thing. It's like the variance is way higher, but we are a much more dangerous offense with Trey Lance as the quarterback than with Jimmy G as the quarterback. And it also adds, that rushing threat. Like, the 49ers had 4 people with a rushing attempt yesterday, and only one of them was a running back. So they become this fascinating offense that's so difficult to figure out, that has unique playmakers everywhere, including now the quarterback position. And inevitably with that degree of variance, it would take something truly special and truly remarkable and implausible for the 49ers to win 4 straight playoff games because of the negative that is in this variance. But the chances they can win any one of them, I think, is dramatically higher with Trey Lance, a quarterback, than with Jimmy G.
So very similar to the Philadelphia Eagles as far as bringing something unique to the table. The Niners, as I said, they haven't locked up a playoff spot yet. They need to either beat the Rams next week or have the New Orleans Saints lose to the Atlanta Falcons. So that's what's happening next week as far as the playoff picture goes. The 49ers will be either the 6 or 7 seed if they get in. So that means they're probably playing Tampa Bay or the Rams again in the playoffs in the first round. Potentially the Cowboys, I think, could be in play.
The Rams would be interesting, just given San Francisco's record against the Rams.
Yeah, I was looking at. I glanced at some of the scenarios. I was trying to see if there was a way that the Bucs could play the Saints. I don't think it's possible because if the Bucs play, so the Bucs' worst case scenario would be playing the Saints. I don't think it's possible. There's no scenario where that would work. But the Rams' worst case scenario would be playing the Niners, right? There'd be back-to-back weeks, but also the Rams have struggled against the 49ers. If you think about that, if you believe in that stuff, if you think that matters, that's probably, the worst matchup for the Rams as well. But that's that one's still in play.
It's probably it's not one of those things I think that matters like historically. Team X is X or whatever win percentage against Team Y. But when when all the coaching is the same, when all the actual important people in the scenario are the same, then I think it probably matters. Like the Sean McVay tenure has not fared well against the Kyle Shanahan tenure, and those people are still there. The schemes are still the same. Like that, I think is meaningful. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean it's a lock that the 49ers beat the Rams, but it does probably mean that the 49ers are maybe the last team that the Rams want to see in the postseason.
Well, they're going to see them in Week 18 next week, Rams and 49ers. Let's go Arizona Cardinals 25, Dallas Cowboys 22. By the way, the games are going live over on Premium Stats 2.0, all part of your PFF Elite package. We appreciate everybody that was in on the Elite Up with us just before the new year, but it's back to NFL Pod. You get 25% off with the promo code NFL Pod. This one's always live. And again, it's our way of giving back to our listeners. So use our promo code NFL Pod. If you listen to the other podcasts, don't use theirs. Use ours. 25% off every PFF subscription. It's NFL Pod. And you can get in on the action today as these games come in live, and you can see all of those advanced grades and stats. All right, Cardinals 25, Cowboys 22. As I mentioned, Cardinals moved to 11-5. Dallas falls to 11-5. And this was a pretty good game. Arizona just kept making plays. They started to pull away. Cowboys get back into it late. I made one innocent tweet about Trevon Diggs giving up 1,000 yards, and it's gone viral. Everybody's some people are angry at me.
A lot of angry
people. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this game, Sam?
Impressive from Arizona. The wheels had kind of fallen off their season a little bit, right? They had been the team that was impressing as much as anybody, that were in a real dogfight for that number one seed, dropped some games, kind of took themselves out of it, and you're like, they're a step down now from everybody else. And then they beat a Dallas team that looked like they had bounced back into that conversation, and looked pretty good doing it. I think I was pretty impressed by what Arizona did in this game, and it reminded me more of the Arizona games from earlier in the season, where there have always been flaws to this team, like areas of concern, but when they play well, they're able to offset them, and guys are able to make plays anyway and sort of do just enough to get by, and that's kind of what we saw.
Yeah, I like the fact that they are developing playmakers. Christian Kirk had some big plays in this one, had an opportunity for one or two more. AJ Green, he was the one who had the 42-yarder on Trevon Diggs that put him over 1,000 yards allowed on the season. So AJ Green had 74 yards on his 3 catches. Zach Ertz had a bunch of short stuff in there, but then Antoine Wesley, he had the key touchdown, a 19-yarder. Remember, Wesley's the guy a couple weeks ago against the Lions who was open on 4th down, made a pretty nice catch, kicked the pylon. They said the pylon was out of bounds. Like, he's a big receiver who's been a downfield threat with DeAndre Hopkins out of the equation. So, yeah, I mean, Wesley had 30 yards on 4 catches, but this was a 19-yarder. This was a where Kyler throws it up and away from coverage on, I think it was Anthony Brown. Just a really nice play. So they're developing these other playmakers here. This also had one of the craziest, it was a crazy drive. I think I retweeted Eric Edholm, who recapped the scoring drive from the Cardinals, which involved a fake punt, helmet catch. It was the Tyrone Protho catch, right?
It was halfway between, right? It was like if the Prothero catch and the David Tyree helmet catch had a baby. This is what it would look like. Like he went to catch it around the defender, and then could only kind of keep one hand on it. So sort of after catching it like that, pinned it with the one hand on the helmet of the defender, trying to cover him or trying to break it up rather than on his own helmet. It was an absolutely freakish catch from Jonathan Ward.
It was unbelievable. That gives Jonathan Ward a 98.1 receiving grade on his only, receiving
Although
stat in this game.
It does beg the question of what he would need to do to get to 100.
Yeah, we should investigate that. Get him at 110. Just break the grading scale. So yeah, that was a fun play, and it led to a scoring drive for the Cardinals. So there was some fun stuff like that. On the negative side for the a couple things on the Cowboys. I thought Dak threw the ball pretty well. They did not get the ground game going at all. You had talked about, hey, the Cardinals' run defense has, been a bit of an issue, and maybe they'll attack. They didn't attack that at all. I don't know if the game flow just wasn't there, but Zeke goes 9 carries for 16 yards, and Tony Pollard only had 3 carries for 9 yards. They didn't try a ton. And I thought the Cowboys were just kind of inconsistent with Dak's accuracy, and he had a bad turnover in there on a fumble. But I thought he threw the ball well overall. And then there's a touchdown to Michael Gallup where Michael Gallup tears his ACL. So there's just a really bad double whammy there for the Cowboys in this one.
Yeah, that was a huge blow for Dallas. I think a silver lining is that Cedric Wilson had a really good game in this game, and Cedric Wilson is obviously the guy that will need to step up the most to replace what you have in Michael Gallup. So it's kind of fortuitous timing that Wilson has a good game as you lose Michael Gallup and kind of raises his hand as a guy that might be able to step into that bigger role. I think Gallup, he injured his knee sort of as he planted to jump up for that ball to make the catch. Like, he also kind of clipped his own leg, like, while in the air. But who the hell knows? It's a freakish thing, but I can't imagine a way that tore his ACL. So I think it was when he planted his foot in the ground to jump, which means that he did everything after that point with a torn ACL, right? Knowing that, oh, wow, that hurts. Like, obviously you don't know in the moment that, oh, that's my ACL gone. But, like, planted his leg in the ground, sharp pain in the knee, and then was able to stay in the moment enough to, like, contort his body, make the catch, twist in the air, come to the ground, secure it, touchdown. And then, by the way, my knee is screwed, guys. Stretcher, please. That is nuts. Like, I've seen guys in the midst of a game or in the midst of a play, like, literally fling the ball away in the middle of a play because they just hurt their knee, right? They just tore an ACL or whatever. And their immediate reaction has just been instinctively to fling the ball away in pain. Gallup, not only did he not let it screw him up, he was able to maintain sort of focus and catch a difficult touchdown with the injury. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible, and that was a part of Dallas's comeback attempt that just wasn't enough. You had Kyler Murray rushing for 4 first downs in this one. It just felt like he was opportunistic as a runner and timely with his runs, and another one of those, extra dynamic, right? Even though he threw the ball okay in this one, put the ball in harm's way a couple times, but Murray's been a big time throw machine with that rushing ability as well, which again makes Arizona very difficult to defend, which is the theme here. These quarterbacks who have been difficult to defend around the NFL right now.
Arizona also brought Zaven Collins out of the doghouse, their first-round linebacker, who hadn't been playing the last few weeks, had been limited to special teams entirely, played 17 snaps in this game, and played well. Like, he's their best run defending linebacker. He plays the run in a different way to any of the other guys they have. He reads things quickly. He comes down aggressively and fills lanes, generally sifts his way through traffic really well. That's another one of those moves where, remember earlier in the season, we were sort of saying there was 2, 3, 4 moves that the Chiefs could make from a personnel standpoint that would make them better incrementally. Thornhill over Sorensen and all those kinds of things. I think that the Cardinals need to lean into giving Zaven Collins more playing time. I understand there's some growing pains in his play, like he has given up some plays this year, and teams have put him in a bind at times. On the other hand, I'm not sure that wouldn't be the case if, Jordan Hicks was the linebacker in those situations. Like, I remember a while ago they played Carolina. He was only on the field for a few snaps, and he wound up, essentially covering Christian McCaffrey in the flat on one of them and then trying to be the force defender on Cam Newton at the goal line on the other. And you're like, well, that's like a no-win scenario for most linebackers in the NFL, right? So he went 0 for 2, negative. But are you telling me Hicks would have done better? Like, Hicks also would have got juked out of his shoes by Christian McCaffrey and probably wouldn't have stopped Cam Newton one-on-one in the open field. So, at that point, you have to look at it and say, yeah, sure, Jordan Hicks was the guy that, won that job or we thought was going to get it. On the other hand, Collins is a better run defender, and I'm not sure he's a dramatic downgrade in the other things, so maybe we're better off this way.
We say that a lot about how difficult it is to play linebacker in the NFL. I think those couple plays highlight it. I also want to highlight Micah Parsons and just how much of a freak he is, because he rushed the passer 25 times, had 9 pressures, and then dropped into coverage 20 times, gave up 3 catches for 8 yards, meaning, essentially there's underneath stuff, but he's like covering Chase Edmonds, a pretty shifty receiver, receiving running back, in the flat, holding him to short yardage and all that stuff. Micah Parsons, truly, man, just such a special player. And I just want to clarify again, too, when I tweeted that out, and one person responded, like, oh, it's like the year that Khalil Mack was all pro at linebacker and as a defensive end. I'm like, no, that is a voting quirk. That is, the voters didn't know what position to vote him at. It wasn't about Khalil Mack's skill set. I will continue to reiterate, Micah Parsons, I've seen Julian Peterson comparisons, which I think might be fair. I've seen LeVar Arrington, which might be fair. Yeah. Dante Hightower, I don't know. But players who can legitimately rush the passer and legitimately play off-ball linebacker, there haven't been many in the last 20 or 30 years. Literally a handful, and Micah Parsons might be doing it better than any of them. He could be a top 5 pass rusher and maybe one of the better linebackers in the NFL. That just doesn't exist. And so I know the Cowboys lost and all, but Parsons had another huge game.
He really is incredible. Like, he reminds me of a player playing at a lower level of football. Like, the lower level you go, the more obvious it is the players that are different levels of athlete, they just stand out, right? And the way you see it most obvious, if you look at like any NFL player's high school tape, it looks silly. It looks like a player that doesn't belong at that level because they don't. Like, they're destined for the NFL. The other guys are destined for like office jobs, right? It's not the same thing. And you can sort of see it at any level. Like, in the Irish league, right? You can see the guys that are like legitimate players. You get an American that comes over who's been playing at like, high school or collegiate level. You're like, oh yeah, that guy. You can see it. He's different. It doesn't look the same. He hits with a level of violence that's different to everybody else. He moves in a different way. Parsons does that at the NFL level, which is insanely rare. You almost never see it. Guys that just are, Tyreek Hill is one of them. People that are just a different level of athlete to the super athletes that are the baseline in the NFL. Parsons beats a block, and then the closing speed that he has on quarterbacks is nuts. The speed that he has to defeat blocks is nuts. Like, he just plays the game at a different speed, intensity, level of violence and aggression to the insane athletes in the NFL in a way that you don't see come along. Like, there is a reason that this guy is compared to Lawrence Taylor. And like, that's the reason. When you look at LT tape, and like the original LT, one of the things that made him so special is that he changed the game because he showed up and was different to everybody else, right? And all of a sudden you had to develop pass protection principles to stop a guy like that because you hadn't had to deal with it before. Of course, you'd had, really good pass rushers that lined up on the defensive end or whatever, but you didn't have somebody that played the game the way he played it. So when he showed up, you had to change things to deal with that. But that was the thing with Lawrence Taylor, is that he played the game looking like that, right? Looking like a different level of athlete, of hitter, of just played the game at a different intensity to everybody else around him at the time. The same thing is true with Micah Parsons. Like, he might not end up as good as LT, but that's why he's drawing LT comparisons.
And we've talked a lot, and not to spend the whole time on Parsons, but we've talked a lot about like hybrid players coming into the NFL and all that stuff, but it's usually through the lens of an Isaiah Simmons, right? A guy that played safety and linebacker and could cover tight ends and all that stuff. We haven't talked about Micah Parsons types because, again, they don't really exist. You don't have guys that can do that. So I'm not saying you can screw him up, because I don't think you can, but that's going to be fascinating to see what the Cowboys do with him going forward, because you could legitimately just have him rush 40 times a game. You could have him play true linebacker. Like, I don't know what the best mix is, But it could even be just week to week, right?
Yeah.
And just really quick, remember when Jadeveon Clowney was coming out and this is like, oh, we run a 3-4. He has to learn how to play coverage, which was really just, play, drop back a few yards and tackle in front of you. Parsons can do far more than that. He can play legitimate linebacker as well and do that extremely well. So it's going to be fascinating to see what Dallas does with him these coming years.
And by the way, because of that, Dan Quinn deserves a huge amount of credit right now for putting Parsons in the position to maximize his effectiveness. He is not – he could have easily, had him at off-the-ball linebacker and then, okay, we need him as an emergency pass rusher because all of our pass rushers have gotten hurt, and then just moved him back to off-the-ball linebacker and be done with it, right? And say, okay, it's really useful having a player that can play two different positions in a pinch, but you need to specialize in one. Otherwise, that's how you win in this game. But Dan Quinn has maintained using Parsons in this multiple diverse role. So even when everybody's healthy, he's playing a percentage of his snaps in the box, as an edge rusher, and they're moving him around, and they are putting him in a position where you do have to start thinking, crap, where is Micah Parsons on this play, right? And that's valuable. Simply as an offense, needing to take a look up pre-snap and identify where the hell number 11 is and then figure out what you're doing on the play is useful, even if he wasn't good at both of them, which he is. So I think Dan Quinn deserves a lot of credit, particularly as a guy who would have had a reputation as, this is the system we play, plug and play. This is, not particularly flexible. For him to show this level of dexterity in terms of putting players in a position to succeed, I think is a big feather in his cap going forward.
Yep. Kudos to Dan Quinn, even in defeat. Arizona 25, Dallas 22. All right, we've got 4 more games to cover here and 19 minutes. If we're going to be the Vikings, we have to play down to our schedule where we end right 19 minutes from now.
Right.
Chargers 34, Broncos 13. I don't have much on this one. Justin Herbert played a nice game, put the Chargers in position. Good bounce back for the Chargers after their really disappointing loss to the Texans last week. Chargers 9-7, and as I said earlier, they're going to play the Raiders likely for a chance to get into the playoffs on Sunday Night Football next week to finish off the 2021 season.
Yeah, Herbert, I think, was solid. Had a big bomb to Mike Williams that sort of made everything look a little bit prettier maybe than it was. But the big thing, I think, for the Chargers is their offensive line was banged up. And remember, the offensive line for the Chargers for years has been a train wreck. And one of the big things this year is they fixed it, right? They got Rashawn Slater in the first round, who, by the way, was incredible in this game again. Matt Filer's had a career year. They bring in Corey Linsley at center. They sort of fixed 4/5 of the offensive line, and they've been able to get by with the fifth being bad. But they've been banged up. In this game, they were starting Michael Schofield. They were starting Scott Quessenberry. They were starting Trey Pipkins, which is usually a giant red flag for train wreck incoming. And it wasn't a problem. Now, look, Denver doesn't have a great pass rush, but I think it's an important thing that forced into the bench, it still wasn't bad enough to derail the Chargers offense in a way that probably would have been in the past. Definitely aided by the fact that Denver does not have a good pass rush, but that was a big game for this Chargers offensive line and another sort of indication that this team is on the right pathway.
Yeah, and I think both teams kind of, as of a couple weeks ago, Denver was very much in the playoff picture. I think them settling in now as a 7-9 team. They're going to play the Chiefs next week. The Chiefs want to win this game. They're not going to be resting anyone. So I think we're looking at a 7-10. Boy, does that sound weird. A 7-10 Broncos team, which I think, given the injuries and Drew Lock having to play the last couple weeks, even though he hasn't been a disaster, they've created some big plays with him. But I think 7-10 probably feels it's slightly underachieving, given I think we thought the Broncos had a very good roster with questions at quarterback. Maybe it's slightly underachieving, but probably settling in where they should be. And we'll spend plenty of time this offseason discussing their future at the quarterback position, whether it's through the draft or making a play for one of the veterans. And then for the Chargers, again, the play-in game against the Raiders, unless the Colts are upset by the Jaguars. So I would anticipate Justin Herbert versus Derek Carr, prime time, the boss on the call, Sunday Night Football. to end the season should be a fun one.
Big concern that I have for this Chargers defense going forward is that it is still like it's Joey Bosa and the player who must remain nameless, number 33, lest we jinx him with injury. It's those two guys, like nobody else. Like those two guys grade well, everybody else grades badly, rinse and repeat. Like that is the Chargers defense right now. And if those two guys don't have dominant outings, they struggle. Like they just need some elevated play from somebody. And the Chargers might be a team where this offseason, a couple of years ago, the Panthers spent every single draft pick on defense. The Chargers might need to do something similar, like just throw everything you have at the defensive side of the ball because the offense is in a reasonable shape right now, but this defense is relying on the talents, the super talents of two guys.
Yeah, and you want to have defensive linemen who could play the run, without a heavy box. I mean, there's a lot of specific things I think the Chargers need, and for Brandon Staley to play the type of ball that he wants on that side of the ball. So definitely something to keep an eye on for the Chargers, who are, still playing for this year and have something at stake next week in Week 18. Speaking of 18, Saints 18, Panthers 10. That was a good one.
Yeah.
18-10. The Panthers get up 10-3 in this one, and then obviously don't score a point after that. They had about 40 yards of total offense in the second half. Sam Darnold got the start and just could not lead the comeback. A couple days after the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl was the game that got me so excited about Sam Darnold. He did lead that comeback. I thought he had the fourth quarter magic at USC that would translate to the NFL. And boy, was I wrong. So
not a lot of magic involved in Sam Darnold's play these days. Not a lot of magic at all.
The ball magically ends up in the other team's hands too often.
That's true. Yeah, I guess, there are some.
So Saints win, move to 8-8, and if they beat the Falcons, they could get into the playoffs with a 49ers loss next week.
God, does anybody want the Saints in the playoffs at this point?
Sean Payton does.
Yeah.
Stitching it together in New Orleans with Taysom and Simeon and Jameis and everybody this year. It's been a challenge, but they're still there. That the defense is
really good.
Yeah, I mean they just have spurts too where they are just like unreal. Whether it's the Bucs game or this particular second half, maybe more than any defense in the league, there are times where this Saints defense just looks unstoppable, and that was certainly from the second quarter on here in this one.
I would really like to see Taysom Hill with a legitimate receiving core because Taysom Hill he's not a bad quarterback, right? We live in this black and white world where you're either good or bad, and Taysom Hill is not either of those. Like, there are bad quarterbacks that were playing football in Week 17. Taysom Hill is not Mike Glennon. Taysom Hill is not even Sam Darnold. Taysom Hill is viable. Now, the question is, how viable and how good can we get? He kind of consistently grades reasonably average. And even in this game, again, like your number one receiver was Marquez Callaway, who we thought might be on his way to something impressive in preseason. It's never really happened for him. He had 10 targets in this game, 6 catches for 97 yards, which is impressive. But he had 3 pretty bad drops. Like he was alternating between like spectacular grab and terrible stone-handed drop. And you're like, come on. The thing is, Taysom Hill, whatever we think about where his ceiling is, he needs you to make the routine plays, right? Because his average play is not a big one. The thing he's struggling at the most is still the kind of lack of the big impact, deep play. His average depth of target is like 7.5 yards. He needs you to pick up the short catch that's put in your hands and is going to move the chains so that he can do it all over again. And those are the plays that his receivers are letting him down on. I would just love to see a game where, instead of the number one receiver, Callaway was like a third option that you could go to. And they just had more there for him because it was Marquez Callaway and then it was whatever Alvin Kamara can do either through the air or on the ground. The end. That's your offense right now.
I'm team speed anyway, but if I have a Taysom Hill or a Jalen Hurts or Trey Lance, guys that are going to be a huge part of the design running game, Lamar Jackson, I think I want speed out there. Not speed, not paddle-handed speedy receivers, Sam. But I mean, again, it's the thing that makes we talked about the Niners being so dangerous. It's like, go cover Deebo Samuel, go cover George Kittle. And oh, by the way, the quarterback is going to be all over the place now with Trey Lance rather than Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, you've just flooded the field with different style of players and like speedy, difficult to cover, difficult to tackle type of players. Taysom Hill is that player. You're going to run the ball with him and run the ball with Alvin Kamara. If you have more Deontay Harrises out there who are just, going to stretch the field and just move defenders all over the place, I think that's maybe the way the Saints can go. And I think Callaway has settled in as like a Corey Davis-ish number two. If he's your number 3 option, you're thrilled. If he's your number 2 option, you're fine. So, yeah, there's definitely something for the Saints to do to maybe put Taysom in better position to succeed if he ends up becoming the guy going forward, or if they bring Jameis back.
You're very much just a supporter of team speed rather than an active participant yourself?
Oh, I certainly do not participate in team speed at all.
No.
Yeah, I support guys who could do what I can't do, which is run fast.
Yeah, and now, so not only can you not run fast, but you can't throw fast anymore. So you're merely a sideline supporter of team speed. You've got the jersey.
I'm still a crafty receiver, though. If you remember, I stacked you, got the ball down the field, 50 yards running away from you.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what you're saying. Somebody asked, "What are you saying at the top of the show?" You can't cover that. It's me. It's me, Sam. You can't cover me, and there's video proof of it.
You say crafty. I say so incompetent you're simply impossible to read.
I baited you.
You're like the people that are claiming that Trayvon Diggs, you just don't understand a corner that baits quarterbacks by getting toasted so much that there's a target coming his way every 2 seconds.
We never circled back to the Diggs conversation, but I don't think there's much. I mean, you did a nice daily with Deontay Lee.
Yeah.
Nice job breaking that down this week. We've touched on Trayvon enough. I think this is the end of the road for Sam Darnold as the starter for the Panthers. They're going to be working hard at the quarterback position this offseason. I mean, it was already the end of the road, but this is like call in boys to men. It's the end of the road. It's over.
Yeah, it's bad.
And the Panthers are going to be looking elsewhere.
It's just a shame that you're still paying him $18 million next year.
It is. But this Matt Rule said we'll see what he can do, and what he can do is a 36.7 passing grade in this game.
We'll see what he can
do. Not
do.
Great. Panthers fall to 5-11. Saints playing for their playoff lives, I believe, in the 4:00 hour next week against the Falcons. All right, couple more to discuss here. Seattle 51, Detroit 29. This was interesting. Russ has had a couple decent games throwing the ball over the last few weeks. They've come against the Lions and the Texans. I don't know if that's enough to salvage his future in Seattle, but they're 6-10 now. And there's a chance this could have been Russ's last home game in Seattle. Goes out with a bang with 4 touchdowns on just 29 dropbacks and DK Metcalf finding the end zone 3 times.
Yeah, it almost felt like, DK's getting really pissed off at this point. Let's just start firing the ball in his direction.
And magically it works.
Yeah. I think it was Gus Johnson and Aqib Talib on the call for this game, right? And Aqib Talib said something about, just getting the ball to DK Metcalf. And Gus Johnson, I think, used the term that there'd been some funky body language out of DK Metcalf in the last couple of weeks. In those games where we've been saying, like, why are you not feeding this guy the ball? And even if you accept that he has a limited skill set, that he's not a complete all-around, wide receiver. He isn't Devontae Adams. He can't do everything well. Even if you accept that that's true, the things that he does really well, A, he's really good at, and B, they're important and they work in any offense. So use them. This was like the first game where they just went, yeah, screw it. Let's just fire the ball at DK and see what happens.
I had an interesting discussion this week with a former NFL quarterback that covers Russ pretty closely and watches Russ pretty closely. He doesn't think he looks as athletic probably since like the second half of last season for whatever reason. He's going to be 34 years old. And in this discussion of where does Russ land and who wants him and all that stuff, I mean, look, he's still potentially one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Hasn't played like it this year, but or since the middle of last year. But I do wonder if that's a part of Russell Wilson's game where he just isn't as shifty and dynamic, or if he could get that back at his age coming next year, because some of those plays where he just makes it happen outside of the pocket, might not be there as much. Now, is he good in the pocket, just throwing the ball? Absolutely. But what made Russell special were those plays, right? Those handful of plays per game. And I do wonder if that's a part of his game that isn't there.
Can you imagine how pissed off you would be if you're Russell Wilson spending $1 million a year on body recovery science and Tom Brady's over there drinking water and avocado juice lasting until he's 58 years old? Or Aaron Rodgers out here with whatever pseudoscience he's rocking. You're spending $1 million a year and you're the guy that starts to fall off when you hit 34? I would be upset by that.
Yeah, because he took all those hits all those years. That's his own fault. Let's go back to your Rashad Penny take. Is it ready? Can we fire up the film? No, we don't have it. But at some point, we will reveal. At some point, there will be a reveal that way back in 2018, in March, Sam declared Rashad Penny better than Saquon Barkley. And look at this one, 25 for $170, 2 touchdowns. Healthy Rashad Penny is unstoppable.
Yeah. It's just taken however many years this is for us to see healthy Rashad Penny. He's finally, actually had a run of games where he hasn't been dealing with some kind of injury, and they've been pretty impressive. We're over 130 yards in 3 of the last 4 games. A ton of that has been after contact. He's scoring touchdowns left, right, and center. He looks like he did in college, right? San Diego State, Rashad Penny was a really good football player and a guy that looked like he was going to be a high-end running back at the NFL level. Okay, maybe you don't take that in the first round. I wouldn't argue that. But it's nice for him that we're finally seeing that. That guy has dealt with a lot of injuries, has been pretty beat up, just hasn't had the run, and we're finally getting that.
And for the Lions, really quickly, we've said all year, watch Penei Sewell. He's the guy. Keep an eye on him. But I think the more we see Amon-Ra St. Brown as their top target with everyone else hurt, they've moved him around. They've featured him. He catches another 8 for 111. He has been one of the more impressive rookie receivers. So I do think Detroit, who looked like they had 0 receivers this year, if you're rebuilding and all that stuff, the fact that you found 1 during the season and now you can attack that position with vigor this offseason, I think it's a great development for the Lions to see St. Brown playing so well.
Yeah, he's been impressive. There's a few players for both these teams, effectively write-off seasons, right? For Detroit in particular, this year was always going to be about who looks good, who shows up, who proves that they are part of the solution, not the problem, and is going to be on this roster for years to come moving forward. Seattle, as much as they didn't think so, were actually in a similar situation where this thing looks like it's heading to some kind of blow up or rebuild or whatever you want to call it, reload. I don't know what this situation is in Seattle right now, but there's a lot of turnover that needs to happen on this roster. And so they were also in a similar spot of who is part of the future here. And one of their biggest problem areas this season on paper was cornerback, where you looked at it and you're like, none of these guys are viable starters going forward. I think DJ Reed has played really well this year. Another guy who always had ability, but was working against it from a size and measurable standpoint, right? 5'9", 190-ish pounds. And those are we looked a while ago, years ago, when Bobby Slowick was still working here. Bobby Slowick, now pass game coordinator for the 49ers. We kind of looked at the history of cornerbacks that were 5'10" or below. And it's really bad. If you have a 5'9" corner, if that guy is playing outside, it's a really, really small number of guys that have been successful. So he was 5'9", 190, and ran a 4.5. It's not even like he has 4.3 speed to back him up. Was a 5th-round pick, had moved to safety, back to corner. This year he's been essentially Seattle's number 1 corner, has played pretty well generally, played really well against Detroit. And I would say he's raised his hand as saying, okay, in an ideal world, we would like it that you're not our number 1 corner, but you can be our number 2 and be a good player going forward.
And the complete opposite of what we used to think a Seattle corner was going to be, right? Shorter and without the arm length and all that stuff. So, yes, always got to look for the silver lining in a lost season for the Seattle Seahawks from a player eval standpoint. Good job, DJ Reed. All right, Green Bay 37, Minnesota 10. Last game of the week, unless I missed one. And if I did, sorry, but I didn't. Packers clinched the number 1 seed. They can not play real football for another 3 weeks, basically, because next week they could be off and then have the bye week. Rodgers has another spectacular game, as does Davante Adams. Uncoverable Davante Adams, a dominant outing by the Packers offensively, and then Sean Mannion played football on the other side for the Vikings.
Yes, he did, and it didn't go well.
Not.
The biggest indictment, I mean, Sean Mannion is what Sean Mannion is, but the Vikings spent a 3rd-round draft pick on Kellen Mond to at least apply some kind of pressure maybe to Kirk Cousins, and that's not happening. Like, not only does Kellen Mond have he's not pushing Kirk Cousins, obviously, but he's not even pushing Sean Mannion for, the backup job. Kirk Cousins is down, the plexiglass didn't work, and all of a sudden the Vikings are like, Sean Mannion game. We have confidence in Sean Mannion. It never even occurred to them that Kellen Mond would be the starter because he's clearly not ready, and they know he's not ready. And so you're watching this game where the Packers are scoring reasonably comfortably early on in the game. It took a little bit of a while to sort of spool up and get the touchdowns rather than field goals. But as soon as it gets to double digits, you're like, well, whatever low percentage, incremental, painful game plan you had is out the window. You now need the quarterback to actually push the ball down the field and try and make some big plays happen here. And that's not happening with Sean Mannion. So you're like, if you're Kellen Mond sitting on the sideline, you're like, okay, this is painful to watch, and yet they think I'm nowhere near this level. How bad must I be that I'm not even in the discussion to be playing football right now? And then we saw right at the end, he comes in, there's 3 snaps, one of which he tries to throw the ball right to a linebacker on a quick slant. Just doesn't occur to him that the guy in the A gap might drop out and get between him and the slant that he wants to throw to. It's just, I mean, the Vikings are in this spot where, Kirk Cousins has some drawbacks to him in terms of the salary that he's on and the very high end of what he can achieve on a consistent basis. But this is a look at the other side of the coin. This is the Baker Mayfield discussion as well, right? You might think it's easy to just grab another guy and get capable quarterback play, but it isn't that easy. You can easily end up with a Kellen Mond or a Sean Mannion, and when that happens, you're in hell.
I disagree slightly on that. I mean, if the Vikings decided to move on from Kirk Cousins, for the season, for a year, for next year, they're not rolling with Sean Mannion, and they would know not to roll with Kellen Mond. They're not going to roll with a 3rd-round rookie. They would find another, at least capable starter. Those do exist. But I do think this shows the people that maybe don't think Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback, or wherever you land on Kirk Cousins, he would have given the Vikings a much better shot to win this game, just like he did in Minnesota earlier in the year, where they won 34-31. Mannion and the Vikings didn't have a shot. Mike Zimmer was asked about Kellen Mond, maybe next week, seeing more of Kellen Mond, and Zimmer said, no, I see enough of him every day. So we might not see Kellen Mond next week either against the Bears to finish the season. Anyway, the Packers are rolling. A.J. Dillon finds the end zone twice as well. Again, I'm team A.J. Dillon. I'm on board. It makes this team a little bit different, right?
So your
you got
team
to tackle A.J. Dillon. You got to tackle Aaron Jones. You got to cover Davante Adams. You got to cover pinpoint passes from Aaron Rodgers. A lot of different things you're challenging the defense to do.
Your team speed and team thighs.
Yeah, that's it. Tristan Wirfs, A.J. Dillon, team thigh over here. Anyway, Packers moved to 13-3. Impressive start to Matt LaFleur's season career. 3 straight years of at least 13 wins. Has a chance at 14 next week against the Lions, where we'll probably see a full Jordan Love game, I would assume. Maybe we'll see a little Aaron Rodgers, but it could be full Jordan Love in Detroit next week. All right, man. Anything else to cover from this week?
Just that this was the final week of the season where records that were set count. In your brain, week 18, any record broken in week 18 doesn't exist. There's an asterisk next to it. It's just irrelevant, right? So anybody that broke a record this week,
final.
It's good. Next week, Steve doesn't recognize your achievement.
Stats are final as of right now. If you didn't get your 2,000 yards or your 50 touchdowns or your whatever you're going for to break next, it doesn't count. It's like a preseason game. Records count. That's fine. The win-loss record counts. The stats don't count next week.
Yeah.
That's why Rodgers is good. He's only going to play, well, he missed a game, but Rodgers is going to end it at 16 games. Like you should.
Yeah. He recognizes the Week 18 thing doesn't count. Remember, send us emails for any topics or whatever you want us to talk about on the Wednesday show, NFL podcast at pff.com. Follow the Twitter account, NFL Pod. That's all it is, right? NFL Pod?
Yeah.
NFL Pod. No, PFF NFL Pod. I knew that wasn't right. PFF NFL Pod on Twitter. And we hit our goal for the tornado relief thing. I think we will just cash that in, deploy the money, fire it out to people. If you want to still donate, we'll leave it up for another day or so. But then I say, let's just get that money to the people that need it, and we'll start a new charity drive. We'll figure out something to do for that one. But let's thank you so much for donating to that. Again, this is just adding to the money we've raised, but let's get that money to people in need.
Yep, let's do it. We appreciate all of our listeners. You guys have all been great. And we'll be back here on Wednesday with the midweek show, and then Thursday previewing all of the Week 18 action. See you then.